Hey guys, Dark Humility here. It is that time of the season. It is time to call it quits for season 11 and to go over my now bi-seasonally improvement in change suggestions for Project Diablo 2 for the next season and beyond. I used to do this every season, but since they've been improving things at a very fast rate and overall just improving things at a relative rate, I've actually been able to reduce this down to 10 pages. I think at some point it was more like 18 pages. um, but yeah, there's not like a ton anymore. They've addressed things, various feedback that I've provided in previous seasons directly in a lot of ways, but in a lot of other ways they actually addressed it with their own creative solutions. And because of that, there's a lot of things that are on this current document, which I will make sure, of course, to provide you guys a link to in the first pinned comment in the description below. And you guys, of course, can review them all yourself. However, I also want to briefly go over them and kind of where I stand on some of these things and where I stand for what I kind of want to see for future seasons in the mod. At this point, um, so much work has been put into this mod that it is by far the greatest mod ever created, but even beyond that, um, it's truly achieved a vision of a better and more fulfilling Diablo 2 experience for the most part. That's just where we've gotten to from the perspective of quality of life, balance, and extra content, and just overall fulfillment from even the looting experience. It is beyond anything I could have dreamed of when the mod first appeared in season one. It's absolutely crazy. So of course, definitely have to give major props to Senpai, K-Knight, and Erlin, and all the other crazy devs that work on this mod or have worked on it at some point in the past, website and game. Crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean it is a crazy thing just in general. But yeah, what I want to go over, of course, is kind of where we're at now. So every 2 seasons, I plan to update this. I'll get rid of things that are no longer relevant. So the next time we'll update it, of course, will be prior to season 14. And we'll see what's no longer there, and we'll see what is still there. And what I still feel like maybe is a bit of a sore point or various sore points that can be improved just in terms of increasing. I'd say at this point, it's mostly an issue of like farming area diversity, some issues with like setup diversity, very small things at this point, things that honestly aren't even really major issues. That's because they've really dealt with every major issue, even major issues involving things like um, the Ubers being inaccessible for new players. Uh, their tier 0 for all of the Pinnacle bosses addresses that 100% effectively. They've addressed major issues throughout the seasons like rune value, things like that. Rune value is no longer really that big of an issue. Yeah, some runes are not worth too much in the very beginning, but all runes are worth something towards the end of the season or at least in mid-season. So overall, all those major issues that had plagued this mod even in the very beginning, as it was still attempting to improve on the original experience, and it was doing so with, I would say, great effect. Even those issues are now no longer a thing. Major issues with various maps or just mapping mechanics like events. They've made every single map event a viable and fun experience at this point. There are very few improvements they can make to so many aspects of the game, which is why this has gone down, like I said, from like 18 to 20 pages down to 10 pages. And that's really just a testament to how much effort they've put in. And at this point, we're kind of mostly getting into some of the more nitty-gritty things and some things that maybe make certain items, maybe make certain builds kind of annoying. Maybe make certain LOD areas people don't want to farm for the most part, and maybe some game mechanics that people are still not engaging with. But overall, like, there's a reason to engage with almost every mechanic now. There's just so much that they've put into this game. Um, which is why I played it for 3 months this season. I played solo self-found hardcore, and I engaged with so much of it at this point that now I feel very comfortable talking about almost every aspect of the experience. Um, like I even feel like Lucian, Rathma, and Declone for the most part are in a really good spot. But of course, we'll talk about some things, and some of these issues you'll notice are still recurring. You'll notice from my last video I made on this prior to Season 10, there are still some of these feedbacks that I still have, and they're still here because these are various directions that I'd love to see them go. But at this point, I don't even feel like they have to like make huge patch notes every season anymore. You know, if they do some rebalancing just to freshen it up a bit, um, you know, maybe change like switch up the maps a bit, and then maybe introduce maybe some of these changes as like a major package or theme that really hammer on a really fun new thing that makes the season stand out. I think they do really good, or just a lot of their own things. One thing to note is um, my feedback list or my improvement change suggestions for PD2 list. I always submit to the devs as well. You know, I always like them to have access to it, and they do a lot of changes on it every season. But they also do so many of their own changes, and they address things in their own ways, and they always do an excellent job trying to address things that I don't even think of, and no one's even thought of in my stream. But this is what it's always is from my experience, and these are things that I think would continue to that could continue to bring fresh and even better experiences for the game for future seasons to come. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. I know kind of a long-winded intro there, long-winded kind of background of where we're at going into season 12. But man, it's been really, really, really incredible being part of this mod now for 11 seasons straight. I still haven't taken a break off of any season. Could happen in the future, but I've been enjoying the ride all the way. So let's get into it. So of course, in the very beginning, I have links to my data sheet and my tier list infographic that I produce every closed beta. Of course, you could see that here. It has a lot of interesting insights, of course, into rankings based on late game mapping, monsters per minute per density, which is the data sheet that goes along with that as well, which is really cool. And of course, you guys can always take a look at these. But yeah, they are already part of the document. Of course, if you scroll to the left, right, I mean, you have all these other very interesting lists as well. Top dungeon builds, things that are solo dungeon capable. Yeah, you have a lot of really cool stuff like that. Absolutely. Starter lineups, recommended Uber builds, just really, really, really cool stuff. Um, which is just really neat in general. But yeah, absolutely. So prominent builds, of course, there's plenty of builds that you can make in this mod that are not listed here. I plan on including more next season. Current state of map immunities, all that fun stuff. I just like to show people what we have in terms of that. Of course, I also have an ultimate farming guide as well, where we show you guys all the things that you could do with starter builds, the most effective farming approaches. I always have countless, of course, build guides on my channel as well. So definitely check out all the amazing resources that we have on my channel for the game in case you're a new player and want to get into it. Also, make sure to check out the wiki to see all the awesome things that have changed in PD2 versus the original game, or maybe differences from D2R, things like that. If you're just getting into the game, one thing to note though is that it really isn't that hard. It's not that harsh of a transition. The game is in a lot of ways easier to start out in the beginning, and as you get to endgame, it gets pretty challenging, like maps and bosses and whatnot. But there's plenty of good guides out there, there's plenty of information out there, and there's plenty of streamers to watch to see how they do it and how they engage with all the awesome content. But yeah, just wanted to show that really quick. Let's get into the meat into what we're suggesting here. So another thing is that we're no longer I took out the like priorities. I no longer suggest like priorities. At this point, everything is just something that if it's addressed would improve the game. Um, I no longer suggest like impact or anything. I also took out the highlights as well, showing what changed from the last list. But I'll still talk about like the fact that they've removed so many things from previous lists because they've addressed them. Like on the assassin, for instance, like Blades of Ice has been addressed as of season 10, and they reworked it. There's not really all that much they could even rework anymore because everything has been reworked to a really high standard. I would say that it's not entirely the case for some skills though. Like Dragon Claw, I feel like is still in a weird spot where people don't really use it. So there are some exceptions like this one. But overall, man, it's been crazy. So yeah, let's go over it a bit. I know I just keep yapping about the mod in general and all the changes that have happened to this feedback and suggestion idea list. But yeah, let's start talking about it. So this is something that I'm not sure if they introduced it this season or not. But it is a bug with Blade Fury where Claw and Dagger Mastery only provides the crit portion. The damage and the attack rating is not applied to Blade Fury from Claw and Dagger Mastery. I think for a healthy interaction with this skill, and in terms of itemization choices as well, it's be important to fix that bug. I'm sure they will by season 12, but it's here anyway. Nerfing Blade Sentinel. So yeah, Blade Sentinel is way too dominant of a bossing ability. Enough said. It is by far like the strongest and fastest way to kill the Pinnacle bosses, Uber bosses, anything like that. You don't even need a good weapon. It's pretty busted. I'll be recommending that. I'll be recommending buffing all of the lightning sentries. The fire sentries I think are in a fine place. Lightning sentries, I think most people would agree with me, just feel really underwhelming compared to most other choices on the assassin and in the game in general when it comes to both mapping and bossing. Not sure exactly why that is. Maybe they just haven't really looked at it in a while. But these just in general map a lot slower. They just underperform compared to Wake of Inferno and Wake of Fire against bosses. They're not great. They're not great in general. So hopefully they at least buff these a little bit, and make them a bit more viable. I even think they could buff them a lot though. I think what happened was at some point they removed the negative enemy resistance stat from applying to traps, and before that they had to like nerf the crap out of the damage of these things, but then they forgot that they had to like buff the damage back up to like essentially like I mean I think they did slightly but not enough to really compensate for the fact that the negative enemy res does not apply to these, and it hurt it a lot more than Wake of Fire's damage and similar fire skills. So yeah, I mean it is what it is. Like even Death Sentry feels more useful because it's more useful in like group scenarios. You can proc it off a Viper Fork on the Mercenary. You can get bodies, and even that is more effective and does a lot more damage. It feels like in group scenarios. So yeah, it's lightning sentries are not in a great state at the moment. Even with the charge bolt sentries piercing, it's still not enough. Rework Dragon Claw to double up on a single martial charge. So this is my idea. So I came up with an idea for reworking Dragon Claw, and I wonder if the devs or anyone else likes it. One thing to note is if you like any of these changes that I am proposing here, these are ideas from myself or my community, or ideas I got playing this season just from myself or my community. Make sure to post these, suggest these things in the Discord, the PD2 Discord, suggest these things on Reddit. Be an advocate for the change, I always message the devs, with this change suggestion list directly, which is often why a lot of these changes every season do actually keep continually getting implemented, because they say, oh yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. They probably try it out and they're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then they go with it. Of course, there's still all kinds of changes. I mean, there's always changes you can have, but these are always modest, conservative changes that have the they have the I guess you could say the momentum of the mod behind them. They're changes that are in line with the spirit of the mod. They don't try to create a new mod. They don't try to go too crazy and like radically alter, the devs, vision for balance and things like that. They're all in line kind of with the general vision of Project Diablo 2. So at least I try to keep them as much in line as possible with that vision. Some of them are a little creative, you could say, take some creative liberties with how to solve a problem. But despite that, they are still what I would consider to be that way. But anyway, so with this Dragonclaw rework, what I foresee is, so like, instead of how it works where it expends 2 charges, if you could expend the same charge twice, and you only lose that 1 charge as well, you'll give more, there'll be more of an incentive and a unique scenario to actually use Dragonclaw. Like, let's say that you actually want the meteors, twice. You can do that currently to some extent with Dragonclaw, but like, you really need to. I think it expends 2 charges though, so then you need to like charge it back up to that again. In this case, you just gotta charge it up once, and then you can do it again. And there'll be more of a, more of an incentive, particularly on certain abilities, to use them twice to really clear more of the screen. You can use the AoE ones more. You can use the single target effects more against bosses. So that would improve like most of the elemental martial skills, for instance, against bosses quite a bit, even Tiger Strike. And it would make those single target impacts a lot better because you could like double up on meteors. You could double up on the ones that hit hard against the bosses in general, just hard damage hits. I think it would actually be interesting without being broken. None of those builds are like super dominant at the moment anyway for those purposes, so it'd actually be kind of interesting. But yeah, basically doubling up on one while only using 1 charge. I think that would be that would actually make people use it instead of just spamming the ability, right? Like just spamming Phoenix Strike or whatever it is. I think this would actually give more incentive. I mean, you could still do the spam thing, but then this would actually potentially get used, and there would actually be a reason to use it. And you could even make, like, I guess Dragonclaw, you could even make it, like, provide maybe a small buff based on the skill level as well. Of course, it could have its own damage involved to some extent, but you can also have it, like, double, you could also have it like boost the effectiveness of that single ability you're using twice as well. So that blind kind of just spammy gameplay is not the only way to play Martial Sin, and it would actually make Dragonclaw useful. So that's kind of my idea with Dragonclaw, so that's kind of interesting. Definitely really interesting things for them to test. Sorceress. This is something I still had from Season 10, make Frozen Orb have an adjustable range based on the position of the cursor. I still think they could do that if they wanted to. I don't think this is like insanely huge, but I think it's an interesting QOL for the Sorceress. Another thing that I kind of had, but I kind of expanded on this idea or changed it a bit, was to make maxing Shiver Armor or Chilling Armor a full build. What I think would be interesting is instead of having the Shiver or Chilling Armor only damage the monster that hits you, you can have it like create like a small cold damage AoE around where the monster hits you that also affects the nearby monsters, that even increases with every successive strike by monsters up to a maximum value for how big the AoE is for every monster striking you. And then if you go out of combat for a bit, it goes back to the smallest AoE, but then eventually gets bigger and it just starts killing things around you pretty fast. And those definitely could stack very quickly as monsters are hitting you very quickly. So you could essentially insert yourself as a bomb inside of massive amounts of monsters. I think that could be really fun. Given that these have synergies and whatnot, it would really be cool if you could actually make this a full build. So that's a really cool idea for like a rework of so this is truly a rework suggestion as well. So we do have a rework for that. We have a rework on Assassin, but potentially, but there aren't too many more reworks at this point that I would say you'd have to completely rework the ability, because they've done such a good job at making the abilities have a very unique purpose, and they are used often in the game. Buffing lightning or chain lightning. So I think at this point, especially compared to like Charge Bolt, I like where Charge Bolt was this season. I think it was actually appropriate. I think lightning and chain lightning, kind of like the lightning sentries on the assassin, have kind of fallen off. And maybe this is because their minimum damage is 1, and maybe that's what really is going on. But that means their maximum damage should be a lot higher, or they should be unique in that they can range harder than things like Charge Bolt or Wake of Fire in this case, or they can have more chaining potential. Whatever it is, when it comes to chain lightning and lightning sentries, there's got to be a reason to kind of use them in the game again. I feel like they've kind of fallen into the abyss in terms of like use case scenarios. Slightly buff Inferno's damage and or range AoE scaling into the late game. I definitely think Inferno is maybe just lacking a little bit of oomph to be used, like in terms of for mapping and for bossing and things like that, a little bit more frequently. You can do it, but I feel like most people would much rather just use so many other sorceress abilities, particularly even fire abilities. I definitely think there's more potential for this here, so maybe making it a little bit stronger. I mean, it makes sense because an Arctic Blast Druid, just for comparison, gets summons. An Arctic Blast Druid has Hurricane, it freezes things, and it has more damage in the late game than Inferno. I mean, I don't know. At least make the damage comparable. That's what I think. Because at least you could make arguments that the Sorceress's survivability can be higher. But yeah, I definitely think there's more potential for that there, particularly with Inferno. And by the way, that's not me wanting Arctic Blast to be nerfed. I think it's probably fine, even though it's insanely strong, because it does require a lot of investment, and it's just very powerful in general. But that's just kind of where I'm at on that skill, based on like budget. One thing to note is when I'm like evaluating buffs and nerfs, I'm really thinking about not just whether they're S or A tier, but also like how budget it is. If the skill is useful for other scenarios like bossing, is it a top bossing skill? Is it a top mapping skill? A top starting skill? If it's none of those things, it probably should get buffed, right? If it's all of those things all the time, it probably should get nerfed. Yeah, that's my general philosophy. I don't really have a lot of like crazy criteria in terms of that, so that's kind of how I think about it. I'm not only using like mapping, for instance, as my criteria that for suggesting changes to the game, because I realize that not every ability is supposed to do everything as well as every other ability. Otherwise, there's not really a uniqueness in how the skill works or plays or what situation you might use it in. But yeah. So another thing is that Glacial Spike, I think, actually has decent damage, but maybe it lacks some AoE a bit. Maybe it could have like a scaling AoE. If you spam it, the AoE continually gets bigger. Can have scaling like Mind Blast with successive. So uses in place. You could definitely do something like that, for instance. I definitely think that's possible there. But yeah, definitely some ideas for improving that skill. It's also a skill that really never gets used. Ice Bolt's really good against bosses. You're going to see Ice Barrage and Orb get used quite a bit for starting out and for endgame mapping. Blizzard even is actually really sick for like bossing, but it's also sick for like fortified mapping as of last season. So that's, I don't know, there's definitely some abilities that are still lacking, right? So at this point, I'm kind of singling out some abilities that maybe don't get used, or they get used too much once again. Abilities, or maybe they have like a clear weakness that they don't or shouldn't have, like something that, you know, they should clearly have a stronger strength in regards to the ability. Sorceress currently does not have great options for dealing with high amounts of elemental damage on PD2. So this, I repeat this point on the Necromancer. It's the exact same point. And this has to do with Pinnacle bossing for the most part. So everyone knows that for the last, like, I don't even know how many seasons, maybe ever since like a tier 2 bosses became a thing, um, it's very clear that like the sorceress, I mean, I would even say before that, I'd even say since the beginning of Pinnacle bosses in PD2, which is the beginning of the mod, sorceresses and necromancers have been at a disadvantage. Let's be honest here. They are at a disadvantage. You know it. I know it. You can just tell from, the fact that on hardcore, I'm pretty sure like every single necromancer slot is still open for killing tier 2 Rathma. Just as an example, on softcore, there's like maybe 2 slots even still open, even for softcore. A sorceress, very similar situation. All the other classes don't really have it nearly as bad. Yeah, I mean, tier 2 is still, the tier 2 bosses are still really tough for a lot of the other classes as well, but they're more doable, and the slots get filled eventually at some point in the season for people getting those top 3. Blah, 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 blah. Or at least in terms of a decent amount of people achieving it at some point, just so they get the normal aura and the access to closed beta the next season. All that seems to be in a pretty good spot, except for 2 classes. So this is where I actually suggest some possibilities for how to adjust that. Before on my feedback list, I literally just said, I don't know how to address it, but I think it should be addressed. But now, I'm coming forward with proposals. Real things that they can do that other games have done, like PoE 2 maybe, that might actually be able to solve this to some extent. Yeah, that it doesn't make survivability on these classes so insanely rough. Particularly, I mean, it's rough in general for these 2 classes, if I'm being honest. They die all the time. But less rough, particularly for the bossing, where it's really hard to get enough life to face them. And they're at a clear disadvantage based on their 1 to 2 vitality to life ratio. And where Druid also has a 1 to 2 ratio, and so does Paladin, but they also have all these other crazy things like shapeshifting, lycanthropy, holy sword, block, really crazy block frames. They have these other things that make their survivability really good, or just max res you can acquire through skill points like on the Paladin. You just don't really have these for those other 2 classes. So this is why I think these are things that could be a thing for these 2 classes particularly, but you definitely have to be very light. This is a very light touch. I don't think you need a very heavy touch to push them into being more viable for these like really upper tier fights, like the tier 2 Pinnacle bosses, and just in general not dying quite as easily. Something that's definitely more of a problem on hardcore and otherwise, but just a problem in general for really tackling that content. With really good gear, you're still dying and whatnot. Even with jaw runes stacked up the ass in terms of like just everywhere on your gear, obsession staff, everything, and you're still dying because you can't get enough HP, and it's still super challenging to get enough HP. So yeah, so this is kind of what we're getting at here. And it's clear, it's clear that this is a problem. Once again, like I said, anyone knows that with these 2 classes, it's super, super problematic for doing that. At any rate, let's see here. Yeah, so, I just kind of go over like an overview. They both have struggle with dealing with high amounts of elemental damage. Energy shield's weak against high amounts of elemental damage. Necromancer has bone armor, so an energy shield is good against physical damage. Bone armor is good against physical damage. That's fine and good, but against things like Declone, Lucian, and Rathma, that's not really going to help you, right? and they have that 1-to-2 life Ida ratio, and they don't have the crazy bow, oak, and absorb that you would have on the original game. So this is definitely something that's definitely plagued them in PD2. So these are some options for dealing with that. We have add maximum percent life or 50 to 100 life as a base mod on wands and or sorceress orbs. So this is an interesting idea. So we've singled out staves and given them faster cast rate. And in some ways that has just made staves better than sorceress orbs and necromancer wands, period. I actually do think staves, most of the time you'd rather use a staff than a one hand and a shield. For the necromancer, there are more scenarios where you'd want to use a one hand and a shield, particularly because of how strong the bone flame is and whatnot. But that being said, when I'm testing maximum clear speed most of the time, I'm finding that the staves like Ming Song and Skull Collector just overall just give way more damage and survivability for what they do, and allow you to hit those breakpoints way easier. And so I do think orbs and wands to some extent have been outclassed. So if you add maximum life or 50 to 100 life as a base mod on wands and or sorceress orbs, you're gonna get you're gonna get necromancers and sorceresses to just have more life with more setups, and then they're not all using obsession staff as well, which is kind of an issue, where obsession's the only staff that gives the maximum life, and the other stats that's going to help them do pinnacle bosses. So all the pinnacle bosser sorceresses and necromancers pretty much use obsession, the obsession rune word, and I don't know, that's not great for build diversity either. So I think this would be pretty huge, having this as a base mod on all these ones. And currently, wands and orbs do not have a base mod, so I think that'd actually be kind of interesting. And I think that might finally bring parity to the staves. The staves were far behind before without the FCR. With it, I would say they're pretty far ahead, particularly with all the other stat modifications that have been made to the staves, just the huge buffs to all the staves in general. The runewords and the unique items, whereas the wands and the orbs just haven't seen nearly as comparable buffs. It's definitely made them fall behind, but I think this would do it, particularly for bossing. This would make a big difference. Just being able to get maximum life and whatnot as a base modifier. And what's interesting is, I mean, you could even like make instead of ignore target defense, you could even make like the jaw runes give maximum life in weapons as well, which could be kind of interesting. But maybe it only gives it in like wands and orbs, and it doesn't do it in any other kind of weapon. That's another thing you could kind of do, but I think that's definitely decent. But yeah, I mean, you have to use obsession currently, and on melee builds, any melee build has access to Doombringer, so they already have not just Doombringer, but there's all these other like options as well that are very strong. They give a lot of PDR or maximum life on weapons, whereas that's not really the case on a Necromancer and Sorceress. So I think that could be a pretty good idea. Also, make a certain percent of gear requirements, strength and dex, convert into life vitality. So that's actually a solution that PoE2 is rolling out for their next season here. They're making it to where armor also improves your resistances. So armor is bleeding over into resistances, but only a certain percentage of said armor. I don't think that's a bad idea. When they're already at like 1 to 2 conversion, I don't think the solution is making them 3 life per vital point, because then they just become like every other class. But what if you don't get penalized for having really big dex or strength requirements on your gear as much, and you can actually have some of that bleed back over into your life essentially, so you can maybe get like 20-30% of it back. That would also help the situation where not everyone feels forced to wear a staff too, because staves don't really have They don't have requirements like that. They have level requirements, but they don't have requirements like that. So that's another thing that's going on with these bossing setups being so bland, but also like not effective enough. So maybe just have all the requirements bleed back into Vita to some extent. That'd be kind of cool, I think. It would definitely make bossing from Declone to Wrathwind to Lucian a lot easier for the Necromancer or the Sorceress. Uh, of course, I think all of these could be implemented at the same time, even. At least to some degree, and you would probably still not make a problem. This really addresses the fact that every setup is an obsession build. This just addresses a base problem with the classes in general. And then this would provide items that truly make, that truly elevate those other setups to be able to compete with obsession, like wands or orbs that maybe have this base stat, and on top of that, they even give maximum life. So you have more Runewords in general that can give those pinnacle bossing stats, maybe maximum res or maximum life or both. And I think that would help a lot, because then, at the very least, if there's maximum res on it, then they could put more jaw runes elsewhere. You know, there's something they can do in that regard that would really help out those two classes. All right, Druid. All right, I don't have a lot to say for the Druid. You know why? Because almost everything is good on the Druid now. Like there isn't a lot that feels just trash. The Druid in general either has really high survivability, really high damage, or both, or at least some combination of them on virtually every build. There's not a lot I can really say in terms of like recommendations here. Yeah, they could do slight tweaks if they want, which they typically do every season anyway, but I don't think they're going to make a huge impact. I guess what I would say is a couple things that I think might be a bit more healthy for the Druid would be to increase the rabies damage while reducing the speed of spread slightly. I feel like maybe in some ways they've over-nerfed rabies for bossing, but the spread speed is still so insane at mapping that it's still hard to justify doing other things, particularly on a budget. Also, rabies just being super easy to make you really tanky on as well, which makes it like a no-brainer in so many situations. I wouldn't make huge changes in either regard, but I would make some slight reductions of speed, while also maybe increasing its damage to where like tier 1 bosses become a bit more accessible to rabies again. I think that would be fine. Slightly reducing physical damage scaling on Volcano and Armageddon. Yeah, the fact that these are able to do so much damage that you don't even need like Infinity or some kind of like additional negative res on your mercenaries gear or on your own gear kind of says that maybe it's doing a bit too much damage. I mean, it's crushing with Decrepify on an Act 3 mercenary. Decrepify, it's not even amp. I mean, it's a little crazy. They might want to tone that down a little bit. It's not too crazy though. The thing is that they're kind of in a good place when it comes to bossing, so it's really hard to say that's what they should do. Maybe they can like put some of the scaling into Volcano and then maybe reduce it into Armageddon. There's a couple ways they could maybe balance this out to where it's still good at bossing, but it's not necessarily so ridiculous for maps. Any maybe maybe they could even buff the fire scaling to compensate, and then I think that would that at least not touch too much. And in that case, Decrepify might not be alone for maps, but for bosses, you're still doing similar damage. They might want to take a look into that, though. I definitely think it might be a little too ridiculous the way it currently is in one scenario, but fine in other scenarios. Like, I think it's fine for bossing now, but for mapping, it's not. So, like I said, maybe some small adjustments in that regard. And then, this is something that I've gotten a lot of comments about in my chat this season, and I think it's actually kind of problematic. The more I think about it, the more I think shapeshifting shouldn't be somehow unique in this regard. shapeshifted druids, it feels like, have dominated the Pinnacle bossing scene for a very long time because of this, particularly on hardcore, because they know that as long as you're shapeshifted, if you get put into 1 HP and don't get immediately hit by something else, or the damage isn't continual or whatever, you'll be able to survive. You'll be able to survive no matter what, right? So you'll be able to 100% survive no matter what. And I feel like that's not cool, because you'll just untransform and then you can retransform after potting. You never die, which is essentially how the elixir of death evasion used to work in Diablo 4. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's such a great thing. I think what they probably should do is allow you to maintain your shapeshifting form throughout the acts. That's fine. But I think if you reach 0 HP, even shapeshifted, you should die instantly. I think that's a good balance that finally brings some level-headed clarity to how ridiculous Druid bossing can be. And also just in general recognizing that Druid has been in such a dominant place for many seasons now that it maybe could use a little bit of scale backs, given that all of its abilities are so ridiculously strong. Barbarian, just to increase more approach diversity in the game in general. Barbarian, make Find Potion a full late game throw potions build. So I think it'd be really cool to have a build where you actually threw potions and that was actually your build for like or mapping or something. And you could do it. There's a skill that allows you to do it. One could argue, though, that skill is practically never used. So this would be a opportunity for a rework here. Once again, I think I've suggested maybe a grand total like, what, 3 reworks maybe? 3 complete reworks. Yeah, everything else is not really much of a rework, just an adjustment. So that's it. And I suggest how you could have synergies, increase the damage of the potions. Potion of every damage type can be possible in addition to increasing odds of better potions per level, like normal potions. So it could be a little bit RNG based. And there can be a quantity associated with these ultra powerful potions. You could also make it infinite quantity like every other throwable, though. And so you no longer have to actually use the skill on a corpse at some point. But instead, you're just using the throw button, and you're just throwing the potion once you hit, like, max level. But if you increase the level of it, you're going to have to find a new potion. So that could be kind of interesting. I think that'd be really neat. And you could increase power of the potions, and you could finally have like what's truly an elemental barbarian that isn't just abusing like auras and whatnot, like from Double Flame Bellow or something. So or Stormspire. So that actually be really cool. That'd be really cool. Or even Double Shapers is kind of interesting, but Shapers is physical, so. But you get the idea. You could actually have an actual throwing build. And you could have the throwing mastery increase it. You could have so you could have one of the masteries, Grimward Battle Command, and then the rest could just be, you could put into generic buffs that you would normally put for the Barbarian. And you could put them into Leap, you could put them into whatever. And I think that'd be really neat, actually. It's a cool idea for a rework. They could do one of these seasons, though. Buff find items scaling somewhat to make it feel impactful again. Best result, make scaling the same as old LOD, but remove find potion synergies for slight overall nerf to trap farming from its peak. So I'm still pushing for this. They haven't done it since they've nerfed it. I still think find item is still over nerfed. I really do. People still use it for Travancore, but it's still like, it takes a lot and you have to invest so much into it that it's really hard to justify having a good find item in the early game, almost to the point of not using it. I really think the LOD balance was decent. I think the problem is when they put the D2R changes in and you could get like 70% find item, that definitely made it really, really crazy and almost way too dominant. Trab, I definitely think a small buff is still in order for find item, though. I'm hoping they can address that at some point here. All right, make frenzy double swing unique. Okay, so one thing I always feel that's kind of interesting is that frenzy and double swing, if we're being honest, in PD2 almost always feels like a gateway for other abilities. It doesn't matter how much they buff frenzy or double swing. It always seems to be playing second fiddle to berserk. It's playing second fiddle to throwing barbarian, whirlwind, whatever it is. I think there needs to be a reason that people would actually just use these as main abilities, not just as, I guess you could say, as backup abilities or as like buffing abilities. Buffing abilities is really what they're typically used as. Um, so one thing that I think maybe we should do is that let's not mess with the faster run walk or anything, but maybe make the splash radius increase only work on itself or double swing as frenzy charges up. I think that'd be pretty big because double swing always does more damage than frenzy, but as long as it works on one of those abilities and it increases up to a higher amount, you could even allow it to increase higher if you did it like this too. If you designated it to only work on itself and it's not just a generic buff, and it could get you more splash than Berserk can. That would make Berserk really strong in that it gives all that negative physical res, but then this is strong in that you have really large splash radius, maybe comparable to like shapeshifting or like a bear normal attack or something. That would really bring it to the level to where people might actually want to map with it or boss with it or whatever over Berserk, for instance. I really think you need to make it unique in some way like that. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Um, but yeah, like I said, you could even make the splash radius higher than what it currently is. You can make it cap higher because it's only applying to itself. So it actually gives you more levers upon which to balance the skill. We'll see if it happens. I'm pushing for it. Awesome. Make a bow mastery or make it part of throwing mastery to make barbarian bow builds more prominent. They attempted to do this one season. I guess it didn't work because of a bug or something. They didn't bring it back in season 11, so I don't know. Maybe it's too tough to do, or maybe it took too much time. But it would still be cool to make, you know, projectile mastery of some kind. You could even call it projectile mastery included in the throw potion build at some point. And that'd be neat. That'd be really cool. Barbarians don't only use, meaty Viking weapons, so it'd be kind of neat to see that, at least not historically. So then again, maybe for the fantasy, maybe it's best we don't make the barbarian throw so many things. Maybe we even delete double throw from the game. That'd probably make people pretty upset, but oh well, it is what it is. Alright, so Necromancer. So I'm not going to go over the whole thing that I went over with the Sorceress again. That's still just addressing the fact that those two classes feel like they are slightly behind these other classes in terms of survivability, bossing options, whatever. Not able to achieve the same levels of dominance that other characters can with reasonable skill and reasonable gear. So it is what it is. I won't go over it again. Necromancer's there, Sorceress is there. They both have shitty options against elemental damage. They both die easily to large amounts of it, like from burning souls as well. It's not just Pinnacle bosses, but I don't think I have to go into it much more. I think you guys probably get the idea. Max Curse Mastery should allow cursing of enemies that cannot be cursed. Yeah, I think that would be a cool mechanics change, and that way possessed monsters don't somehow just persist from Dark Pact and escape scrutiny, making you effectively useless against said monsters. I think that'd be cool. However, at this point, every single, I don't know, I would say the Necromancer is very balanced. There's definitely some of their items could be improved. We'll go over those in the item section. But I think the skills themselves are very balanced. I think they're very fair. They require the certain amount of gear to get to the point to where you'd want to be at this stage, given budget and given effectiveness of the skill in various scenarios. Um, I think they're pretty solid at this point. Like from season 10 and season 11, they made a lot of really key improvements to a lot of Necromancer stuff and a lot of Necromancer builds in general. So I like kind of where the Necromancer is at in general. Um, I like even survivability of the minions. I think is in a pretty good spot now. That was a problem for a while, but they fixed it. There's a lot of suggestions that I've made that they've fixed over the course of the last year or so. Um, I don't really have a lot to say. I mean, it's pretty insane, pretty good. Um, One thing I guess I forgot to put for the Necromancer, one thing that I could still do. Um, Let me think. Let's think about this here. I guess one thing I would say is that Iron Maiden doesn't really do anything. I guess that's my like main criticism. Um, Make Iron Maiden effective in combat scenarios. Now, I say this because um would be cool for bone. The bone wall changes last season made the bone walls actually deal damage. It'd be really cool for the monsters to damage themselves and the bone wall. And if you could stack amp, see right now only amplify damage is really effective with the bone wall build. It'd be really cool to see Iron Maiden. I'm gonna put actually effective in combat, sir. A bone wall build to truly come online in more scenarios. See, right now it works really well like in cows and some things like that, but um, it's clear to me that in a lot of scenarios it's not really working out. So yeah, it's kind of a thing. It's kind of a thing. Um, uh, yeah, so I think overall that wouldn't be bad though. So, but yeah, overall, I don't know. I think that's kind of where we're at there. Um, I think that'd be really cool. I don't even have to put like the extra information there. I think, yeah, I didn't really think of that before I started making the video, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, I did one thing I could say about the Necromancer at this point is that virtually every skill feels really good now, even Bone Wall, and Bone Prison, which is really cool. Um, I think that's really cool that Bone Wall and Bone Prison have more of those uses. I feel like they actually gave them a role last season, and I feel like the damage is pretty decent too. But yeah, I think some of the curses now is still where some of the weaknesses. Um, I think making Iron Maiden effective in combat scenarios would be cool, because currently Iron Maiden kind of does nothing. And it's like the only curse on the Necromancer I could say with assurance really doesn't do anything. It just doesn't have damage. So I guess I'll leave that there and see. We'll see what happens at some point with that. All right, so we still have 2 classes to go over, and then we still have a lot of other things to go over as well. So we got the Amazon Exploding Arrow could use an extra AoE explosion upon reaching maximum range. Yeah, I suggested this in before season 10. I think they buffed it last season. Yeah, they did buff it last season. They just buffed Exploding Arrow in general. But I feel like it's still not stronger than Fire Arrow, and it's still not stronger than Immolation Arrow against bosses. It puts it in like a weird spot where people really wouldn't ever really want to use it. I think if people wanted to use it, I think maybe giving a skill cap on it to where if you aim it a certain way, to where at the end of its path it explodes or has a big AoE explosion. I think that could be really cool. Um, I think that actually be really cool. It also increased the uniqueness of the ability. So I guess to some extent this is it's like a small rework, I guess I'd call it. So we'll call that a small rework that I'm suggesting there. I think that's fair. Slightly increased Magic Arrow's range. Yeah, I think Magic Arrow is so close in the late game, and I think it's already decent like earlier on, but I think the range on it is kind of punishing, particularly because there's only 3 arrows. Um, so I think if you increase the range a bit more, have a bit more, you could cast it from farther back. I think would be pretty big, and I think more people would use it. Improve Fen responsiveness. So they tried to do that this last season. I just have it here because I'd still like to see it successfully implemented without bugging out the game or bugging out frames. Because honestly, Fend is really close. Jab's already there. Jab's already like crushing bosses and whatnot, but Fend, we really want to see like really effective map fending. I think that'd be cool. So that's still on the burner for them as well. I'd also call that a small rework. I got like 3 major ones and like a couple minor ones on the Amazon. Buff lightning strikes damage at higher levels. So I think at lower levels it's pretty insanely strong. But I think the problem is when it scales into the late game, particularly in high tier maps, it really struggles. Like it's kind of it's in the same spot, and I don't really know why this is at this point in the game. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys in the chat or some of you guys in the YouTube comments can give me some more insight into this. But why is it that at this point in Project Diablo 2, in Season 11, where most abilities feel like they have a home, most abilities are strong in scenarios, but why is it that every version of Chain Lightning and Lightning, one version of Charge Bolt, not the Sorceress one. Sorceress one's good as of Season 11. That one's solid now. I think it's in a good place. It's not OP, but it's in a good place. Um, Given how much investment you need and whatnot as well. But like, why is it that also the lightning strike on the Amazon is in a similar spot? It feels like all these, like the trap sentries, the lightning trap sentries, a lot of the, you got the chain lightning on the sorceress as well, lightning strike, any lightning ability with that minimum damage of 1 feels like it is really hamstrung at this point in the mods development. If there's some way to kind of make them more effective and consistent at clearing mobs faster in maps while also not becoming a problem for bosses, I definitely think they could use to do this, because this is a bit of a theme. It feels like these abilities uniquely are having this issue at this point. You could have really insane gear and they're still struggling with that damage. And that's also with sockets and like T-strokes and things like that. It's still the case. Improve base attack speed damage of Valkyries at higher levels. I feel like at this point the decoys are in a really good place in terms of how much damage you can do with them. The Valkyries still feel a little, they lack effectiveness, and it makes you not really want to focus on them in a lot of hybrid scenarios like Bozon and whatnot. Or like even Bear Zon. I made a Werebear Zon, passive Zon. I made a YouTube video for it. And it's really cool. It uses Odysseans and everything. It's super strong. But I was thinking maybe like you could make the Valkyries strong and you strong and it would be effective. But the Valkyries being stronger didn't really add all that much. And it almost never does. I feel like the Valkyries could still be used to be buffed in general, particularly at higher levels, not lower levels. You don't need them to be stronger in the beginning when they're, you're clearing Ubers naked. We don't need that, but once again, higher scaling endgame type stuff. Definitely could maybe use a bit more of a role there. And I think that increased diversity of build approaches there. Like all these things, I think could just increase diversity build approaches, or just overall skills that are underutilized or not really utilized because they're being overshadowed by other skills. Um, Paladin. Paladin, really, it's the same suggestions I've had on the previous one. I didn't add any additional ones, and I still cannot think of any additional ones. Um, I think I think these are the only two things I think I would do at this point, is that make the healing abilities more effective for dealing damage, but not too effective. Because people don't just like healing. Let's be honest, people like things like Holy Bolt that heal and deal damage. These two abilities work differently than Holy Bolt though, so I think there's some unique opportunities here to make them deal a solid amount of damage. Maybe they're not even for solo mapping per se, or solo bossing, but they can at least help with the damage, and they actually feel like you would actually want to use them in more scenarios. I feel like despite them being cool, they get overshadowed by just spamming things like Holy Bolt. So I feel like we need something that really brings them. People just like dealing damage. I mean, Senpai said it himself one time on my stream. People only like dealing damage. So maybe we should take that into account. Help those abilities a bit. Every other ability on the Paladin's like in a really good place. I don't think it's too OP. It's too weak at this point either. And particularly in season 11, season 10, I would say the Paladin definitely had some really ridiculous abilities. I don't really think that's really the case anymore. But one thing I would say, there's definitely an opportunity here, I think, to make a lot more of a Paladin's abilities unique. Like truly unique. Even Sanctuary you could include in this if you want. So many of the abilities just work in such a similar way that I feel like there is opportunity to make not every charge essentially just blow up monsters, but there's like a different way in which the blowing up gets done, and would make you want to play one build maybe over the other. Every time I test these, it really just comes down to, oh, well, which build does the most damage the most consistently? All right, well, this is the one you should go, and that's the one that gets the best rating on my tier list because it kills the monsters the fastest, blah, 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 blah. But what if it didn't only have to deal with this? And by the way, that's also why Holy Shock always loses, because it has a minimum damage of 1. Once again, going back to these minimum damage of 1 abilities that I have singled out on virtually every class, and it's the same problem. So what if we actually added something that made a reason to use each ability, and we didn't have to like fine-tune the balance so much that every ability was equal, which is virtually impossible, because Holy Freeze freezes monsters and other things. It's just really hard to get it exact. You'd have to have like 14.5 level auras and things like that. It's not going to happen. So what I propose instead is this, that all elemental damage auras could use more uniqueness to the aura's effects and playstyles. Holy Freeze has a chance to freeze enemies near per tick, which makes them more vulnerable to damage. That'd be cool. The freezing, you freeze them, and then they have like a debuff, like a negative enemy cold res debuff that makes them take even more damage. And that one could be like, for instance, more effective against bosses because you're debuffing the monster, right? That'd be really cool. Um, yeah, I could negative cold debuff or something. But yeah, I don't know. I just put debuff, but yeah, I mean, you can see how they do it. It'd be really cool, and maybe that's where Holy Freeze really finds its niche, but also being more defensive because it chills enemies, right? So it chills, but it could also freeze them, and it has a chance to. Every tick, there's a certain odds that a monster might become frozen. Holy Fire could have intermittent explosions around you as you're just charging around, kind of like Armageddon, but a little bit different. Or just have a larger AoE. So you really cement the Holy Fire as a consistent large AoE charge or sacrifice ability, right? These could also be used with sacrifice, just to clarify. And maybe Holy Shock, maybe you want that to have like a chance maybe to one shot like normal monsters no matter what, right? They just automatically have a chance no matter what. The damage doesn't matter, but that one charge you have a chance to just crash into everything and kill it instantly, no matter how much HP they have. So maybe you want to use that in a fortified map, right? Because you'll be able to run those a bit faster, and you have the movement speed to bridge the gaps as well. So you make it like a flash type skill. You turn the paladin into flash with holy shock. That'd be pretty cool. Now I'm not gonna lie to you. Um this is a bit of a like a rework for sure. This is definitely a rework kinda ish. However, you don't really have to rework it completely. It's just like a little bit of a damage thing. So yeah, I still support this rework kinda, and I support this. And then I think the paladin would be in a spot where you could really give the thumbs up and say, yeah, all those abilities are solid and they're in a good place damage wise, and they're also unique. And there's reasons to use the different elemental damage auras, not just that one of them does more damage than the other. Um, Sanctuary Aura, I guess the only reason it's unique at the moment is because it's magic damage and there's not a lot of magic immunities. So like there's something like that going on at the moment, but like I'd say for the most part, most people just use the higher damage one, and that's kind of where we're at. So it'd be kind of cool to see a bit more uniqueness being defined into the auras, so there's more of a diversity of auras people feel like they actually need to use. They actually have a place or a role in the end game. LOD areas. While the prime, and by the way, before I go into this, I should say that virtually every other ability I don't list in the entire game is in a good spot. It has some kind of role where you could be like, yeah, that does a really cool thing, and it's something a lot of people already do or want to do, and there's a reason for it to use that skill currently. And I like where they're at. That's all I gotta say. Um, all the ones that I have mentioned here, I might like where they're at, kinda, but maybe I feel like they're lacking something, or in some cases, they're just not a thing yet. So that's it. And it's based on balance in all endgame, all starting content, everything. So I feel like we've gone over quite a bit. And it's crazy. The video is already over an hour long. But I'm going to make this a pretty long video, so it may as well be a podcast at this point, where I go over improvement possibilities for PD2 that I'll be promoting. So fun stuff. LOD areas. So while the Primeval Soul increased drop rate. Okay, so most of these are still the same. If you guys remember my last suggestion, changes, improvements for PD2, they're still the same. I don't feel like they've done a lot in this regard in terms of some of the things I've been asking for in this section. I would say the biggest sections where they've addressed previous suggestions are definitely the skills on the characters and the abilities in general, that kind of balance, or even things I didn't address. They've addressed those. They've done such a good job there. They've done an incredible job on addressing maps and map events. They've done an incredible job on addressing QOL. They've done an incredible job on items, sometimes implementing the exact change I've been suggesting on so many different items, even map events as well, like with the treasure fallen. You could even go back to my previous improvement suggestions videos, particularly my last one, and you could just see just how many of those things I suggested actually have been implemented into the game. I don't know whether or not it's because I suggested them or not. They'll never tell me that, of course, because, it doesn't matter one way or the other. It was a good suggestion, though, clearly. It went into the game and people like it, so really, that's why I say if you guys like these ideas, if you think they fit into the game as it is, yeah, support them, absolutely. And if you think there's other things as well that I don't have on here, you never know. It's possible I'll include it, but you got to definitely let me know in the comments below, so definitely. But yeah. Anyway, so let's go back to the next section, LOD areas. So let's kind of go over them again, though. I still feel like even with all of the improvements to Worldstone Keep and Hell Bale, I still feel like most people are just like, nah, I'm not farming that. I'd much rather farm Hell Mephisto for Primeval Souls or Diablo. I'm gonna farm the other areas for experience too, like Chaos or Corrupted Zones. Um, Worldstone Keep people just avoid because of the souls and whatnot. So you have a couple of options. You could reduce their base damage in LOD areas, which by extension maybe reduces their damage in maps, so more people feel more comfortable with souls and maps in general. They're pretty overwhelmingly strong in a mod where there's really only one item that has really high flat sword, which is Blackhorn's face, believe it or not. And then of course there's T gods, but that's percent maximum res. You don't really have a ton of options. I mean, you have percent lightning sword with wisp, but it's not nearly as high as it was in LOD. You don't have the huge flat sword on T gods. You don't have all the other options. I mean, even Guardian Angel's down to like 6%. It's really tough. It's really tough to like survive Black Souls with the damage that they still had in LOD without Barb Bow, without, just better bow scaling from a CTA even. Oak Sage. It is definitely challenging. It's definitely challenging. And I think this still haunts players, and it's the reason why people don't farm these areas. Even on softcore, they just avoid them. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it would also help with key farming as well. But on hardcore, it's particularly a problem. So that could be addressed. Make Worldstone Keep have significantly higher Worldstone drop rates. Make it into like a mini corruption zone. Not as good as a corruption zone, but maybe half of a corrupted zone at all times. Something that people can do if they're willing to farm the hard monsters. By the way, half of a corruption zone is basically what Arcane Sanctuary is already because of how many ghosts it has. So you may as well at least bring it up to Arcane's level in terms of Worldstone Shard drops. You can also just make it more appealing in terms of experiencing. Make it more appealing than Chaos for experience. That could be interesting. People might actually want to do Bale runs as well. That says Bale runs are pretty dead in PD2, and they're still dead 11 seasons in, so that's definitely an idea. Increase Hell, Bale, and other bosses' essence drop chance relative to Nightmare. Yeah, make the Hell bosses have better odds at essences, and not just make Bale better at dropping Primeval Souls, which it is, which is good, but also make it even have better essence drop chance. Just more reasons for people to actually farm Worldstone Keep. I think a combination of these solutions would actually be necessary to maybe bring Bale runs back or something similar. But I think it would help a lot because, it's still the case that green essences are worth like a Vex or a Gold rune. I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? Yeah, so I feel like we could definitely, and not only that, but making it more appealing would actually make people want to capitalize on that better Primeval Soul drop rate from Hellbale as well, because currently Chaos is just too good, and I don't think that's a problem. I think Chaos is where it should be, but yeah, I mean, I think we could do something here. I mean, they already made the wave spawn faster. They definitely have done some things for this. It's just I think given everything else, this still needs a bit more oomph. Allow Countess to drop up to low, not just from her regular table, but her standard rune table. But at worst odds. So this is kind of where I had a similar suggestion for Treasure Fallens. And Treasure Fallens now could drop up to Zod, and I think that's great. And it really makes people like that event now, because you can actually get cool things from it. Potentially. And I think the problem here is Bloodraven, ever since they removed the like teleport penalty thing, which was a long time ago, where you couldn't teleport in the cold plains. I think they should have removed it because it was very janky. But now what I think is, so I agree with I agree with most changes they always make, but the truth is like as they learn and continue to improve the mod. But when it comes to this, though, I think that Countess is now at a significant disadvantage. It's just on Battle.net particularly, not on single player, there's really no reason to ever run the Countess because it's going to just take straight up longer than to getting to Bloodraven, even if Bloodraven's more dangerous, which is true, it is. But I do think maybe opening up Countess's rune table wouldn't be a terrible idea, and I think that would actually make more people want to run Countess over Bloodraven, which is definitely something in terms of like approach diversity to farming like terror keys is definitely a little bit of a problem. Reduce the timer for popping monsters. Yeah, so I like that they removed seal popping as a strategy. I mean, any kind of strategy where you can gain insane loot and you don't have to really engage with the monsters or the challenge of the game is, I think, bad. But you won't bring back seal popping if you just reduce it to 1 to 2 seconds. I think they should bring it back, but with a much smaller timer. If they do that, no one will have enough time to get back to the seal silo. It's not like you could seal pop anyway. But then with what, like a 1 second timer, at least the monsters originally just right around the seal will still drop items. It kind of feels bad to have the monsters right around the seal just die and drop nothing. That does feel a little bad, I'll admit. Nightmare and Hell Ancients are slightly too strong. Yeah, so I had this as well on the other list. I think Talik and Korlik are just a little too strong. I think they should just nerf them a little bit. A lot of players really struggle with Nightmare and Hell Ancients on PD2, and I don't think they have to be that much of a struggle, right? I think they buffed them, they made them more responsive, but they could probably lower their numbers slightly. And I think that's still a little bit of a pain point. Red portal area density can be increased further. Yeah, the one-shot potential is too much. So they made it to where a Lucian item drops in. So Lucian became a thing in Season 10. So red portals are actually in a pretty good spot now, and they did increase their density. They now drop the demonic, what is it? The demonic insignia. Yeah, the Dorito. They drop a Dorito. So that's really good. But unfortunately, their density is still pretty bad in there. Like, I think they could add maybe 1 or 2 more elite packs, maybe make it just more dense with regular monsters. That way it doesn't feel like a slog just farming for that Dorito. There's also no other way to get the Dorito than farming the red portals, and sometimes it just feels frustrating. I don't think it has to be that frustrating or that hard to acquire that mat sometimes. So I definitely think they could increase the density a bit more in there, and it would also encourage some more regular farming. They are pretty tough areas, so yeah, I think there should be a bit more incentive for that. Increase elite density in temples. Yeah, so there's some corrupted areas that I feel like, even though they're corrupted, most people would like never want to farm. You could argue that this goes for even things like the Blood Moor, but overall, I think if you increased a bit more density in some of these areas that become corrupted, or when they become corrupted, they just automatically get more density. Not every area, because some of the areas are already solid, like Flare Jungle, Chaos. I mean, even Worldstone Keep is solid from that perspective, but maybe not other perspectives, right? Arcane Sanctuary, even Stony Tomb and things like that are pretty good, but there's things like the temples, some of the Act 3 areas, some of the Act 1 areas, they just feel pretty bad. Like, you just wouldn't ever farm them even if they are corrupted. I think they could do some small things to change that. Nothing crazy. Maps, dungeons, separate. Okay, so I've been pushing this for many feedback iterations of this list now. This is definitely a long-term thing, and I knew it was when I created this suggestion. But I'm still pushing it and hoping one season or one time soon they do it. I feel like if they ever do these really big changes to dungeons, that will definitely make me want to come back to hardcore trade. Right now, I'm just considering just to keep playing hardcore solo self-found because it's just so much fun to do solo self-found in PD2. But what I can say though is, like, this would definitely make me want to consider doing this more for the stream as well, just having more interesting dungeon mechanics. Now I've kind of played them out to some extent to the point where I'm like, all right, we know what they are, we know what they kind of do, but they're kind of in a little bit of a blah place. So let's kind of explain that a bit. I think they've been improved massively. Dungeons. And dungeons aren't like a huge part of the game to begin with, but maybe, since they put a lot of effort into them and they exist in the game, I think they definitely could play a bit of a bigger role, or at least have more of an opportunity to provide something. It's kind of like where Uber Ancients were before they dropped Standard of Heroes. A lot of people would just not bother doing them. They didn't really matter all that much, or they would just run them if they had them. But then, ever since they were able to drop those, and those things buff maps, a lot more people are engaging with that content. These are, I think, even in a worse spot than Uber Ancients were before the Standard of Heroes. In other words, there's not a lot of reasons to engage with this content. And I think this is probably the late game content PD2 that is most in dire straits still at this point. I think everything else is in a very solid spot. I think this is an exception though. So separate dungeons should have unique challenging mob types, or just different mobs that do more damage than normal. They all have the same monster pool. This would also open up the possibility of making dungeons that are not super punishing for melee type characters. So you have like potential to have diverse types of dungeons. It would open up a number of viable fun team comps. Could even favor melee type characters somehow in certain dungeons with dungeon specific mechanics. I give some examples here. Definitely some interesting things. There's definitely a lot of options here. There's a lot of options. Shielding orbs, blood mana curse being put on casters, or things that are similar, but the dungeon's still tough even for the melee builds, but it advantages melee builds. And so that way the type of comp you put together and the types of builds that you can put on a team for dungeons increase. That way it doesn't feel like you're forced to make certain builds and setups just to deal with dungeons, or just to do dungeons with your friends. I think this kind of diversity is definitely needed to make it more likely people would do them. But what's even in a worse spot, I would say, in Season 11, is that they don't really have a spot in the meta. There's no real reason to do them, which is something I'd already mentioned. So there's no real reason to do them, particularly in hardcores. The incentives aren't great enough to overcome the difficulty of putting together a viable party composition. Yeah, it's so difficult to make any party composition for current dungeons, and if they are diverse, it'd be easier, but it would still be tougher though, because you need some pretty durable, strong characters for dungeons, even as a concept. So there needs to be more of a reason to actually do that. And the example I give is like moving Standard of Heroes to Uber Ancients to help Uber Ancients. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. To help Uber Ancients fill a unique role in the game. Exactly. Dungeons need to fill a similar role desired for players. So I do give a possible solution, and it's actually my only bullet point left in Declone Wrath of Uber Ancients, because of how good I feel like all of this is in terms of a place. Now, bugs, notwithstanding, there are a couple bugs still, but everything else in terms of Ubers is in a really good spot, I'd say, at this point. They even made Lilith required now for normal Ubers, which is something I was pushing for many seasons, and they did it last season. You can no longer skip Lilith and just do 2 of the same organ. You need all of the organs. They did that finally last season. They addressed it exactly how I think they should have. I definitely think, removing those janky things. Sometimes LOD did it best, in some ways, and that was definitely one of the scenarios there. And I think they've done the right thing in all those regards at this point. So, yeah, really cool. They made so many good changes that I'm literally down to one suggestion. And it's a bit of a, it's definitely a little bit creative. And I think it's different but I think it would really make dungeons pop. It would make their Declone and Wrathma items pop, and I'm still pushing for it. Maybe at some point we will get something like that, but I don't know. It's possible that this one's a bit at odds with the dev's philosophy. I don't personally think so. I think it would just accentuate and kind of fill some of the gaps with motivating people to do certain content. That is still a little bit of a gap that I feel like would probably need to be closed to really make that content really feel impactful in the overall game experience. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said though, they're not. They don't really have much of a role, you know. Yeah, the bosses can have really good drop tables, but that's about it. In the dungeons, they give a bit more experience, so they could theoretically be more efficient than tier 3 maps, but it's so much easier to put together teams for tier 3 maps. The survivability is so much higher, which, I mean, it impacts softcore too, because if you die, I mean, you lose experience. Hardcore, it just makes people not want to run them at all. You only have people like, you know, crazy content creators doing dungeons on hardcore just for fun. I mean, it's not for even like any real purpose. I think I think that definitely is definitely a point of improvement. But I've removed so many things I used to have in this section, like events feeling underwhelming, like Horizon, Treasure Fallens. They fixed all that. Everything's so good now in terms of all that. They rebalanced the maps to be really good. Uh, Honestly, I don't really feel like there's too much more I would suggest in this section on maps. The Kyrgyzstan Marketplace auto map. They could still get rid of all those crazy trees though. It's still annoying. Still a thing. Create a new. So I recommended this last time. I still recommend it. I think it could be really cool. I give a bit more detail though, so maybe they might be more willing to take a look at this. Is create a new Protect Charcy event. Add it to the event pool. With waves of monsters converging on her from all sides, reward equals enhanced imbue with bad, weak modifiers. Removed from appearing on resulting rare item. High chance of GG rare. So it's like a super imbue. That'd be really cool. And you could just do the super imbue in map. When she is saved, you can talk to her, imbue a white item from your stash, and get like a crazy like basically all the stats are really good stats. Like it removes a bunch of like lower value stats from the pool, and you get like only the really good ones. It could be pretty cool. I think it's a cool idea. um I don't know how much work that would take to do. At this point I think maybe only like one more map event's even warranted, period, though, because like I think they could use one more, because I think people are still like cycling events with like lower tier maps to some extent and just like teleporting to it and abusing it a bit. I think it'd be even harder to do that if they add one more, but if they add too many, it would also make getting the rewards from the other map events too infrequent. So I think they could use one more event, and here's a suggestion on it. So there you have it. That's kind of my feeling of where we're at the moment. Give allocated loot an option to always allocate certain map creation mats, such as world sun shards, gems, and maps to the game creator. So allocated loot is something they implemented, I believe, in season 10. Yeah. And it basically works like PoE loot system, and that, you know, the item is only available to one person for like 5 seconds, and then it becomes available to everyone if it is not picked up within that 5-second window. I think it's in a really good spot at the moment. I think it's a pretty good idea, and it's allowed people to make public games without feeling like they're just going to get people grabbing things and they don't respect the rules. And if you're not with people, you know, they might not want to roll for loot. So if people don't want to roll for loot, this is a great solution in public games so that the loot allocation is fair. I think this is a good implementation. However, I think one thing that's still lacking from this is that even with allocated loot, you have the person making the maps. You still have a game creator making the maps that needs map creation mats to sustain the map creation and to keep the games going. One thing that's really difficult with allocated loot is you're not likely to always get the maps or the map creation mats. But what you could do is have an allocated loot where most of the loot is still allocated like normal, but the Worldstone shards, gems, and maps always get allocated to the map creator first. So they are always, and then if the map creator doesn't want them, then they could be picked up by other people. But you could actually have certain categories of map creation materials always allocated to the game creator. And I think that's really fair because they're the ones creating the maps, they're the ones that are sustaining the public game. And I think that would make a lot of people more likely to host maps, public maps and whatnot, instead of maybe just going solo. I think that'd be really cool, for sure. Definitely increase the vibrancy of that community a bit more. All right, so yeah, this is my single bullet point. It's still here. I still believe in this. I still think they could definitely make the higher tier pinnacle bosses and dungeons a lot more viable in terms of having a reason to exist in the game, and in terms of more people actually wanting to go for them other than just bragging rights. There would actually be reasonable chances of getting those really fun, crazy items so more people can experience them. While I don't want to take away from the specialness of those items, I do think that there should be more incentives to go for them, and currently they're so rare that going for them is kind of a meme. So here we're still at. I feel like this is a good balance. I still think that this makes them very hard to achieve, to get, but not so hard that people won't put in the time to potentially do it. And I think for the really dedicated players, getting these types of items becomes something that feels it feels worthy. It feels worth their time with this implementation. So the idea is to grant Uber item shards that if 3 of them are put into a cube, they randomly generate a Rathma or a declone item. These shards could have a 1 in 20 chance dropping from a boss, like 1 in 3, 1 in 10 from a tier 1, tier 2 declone, depending on the difficulty, of course. And there's still no guaranteed drop on the shards, but if you can get enough of them, you can create one of these items. And then you can drop enough shards to where every player gets one, and they're all allocated using the allocated loot system as well. So because allocated loot exists in the game, you can actually have, when the dungeon boss drops, if they actually end up dropping these, which is like a 1 in 20 chance, if you actually get them, only one player can pick up one at a time for 5 or 10 seconds or whatever, and you can make it to where every player in the party feels rewarded for that, and that rewarded for doing all these dungeons together, which is a very hard content. And make it to where they can only drop with 2 or more players in the game, so that soloing them is not a thing, because otherwise people would probably just run dungeons. But if you want to do it solo, that's where Declone and Rathma really come in, and then you can have them drop from Declone or Rathma. And I think that's a really cool idea, and the odds actually become reasonable at this point. And there's still no guarantee you get any particular item once again. So like it's reasonable enough though to where someone might actually want to farm them enough to actually get a chance at one of these items, instead of farm Rathma tier 2 100 times and still not get a single one. That's probably probably feels pretty bad given how ridiculously hard that fight is, right? So let's think about that, and let's give more incentives to run these things. I'm still pushing for this. Maybe not everyone agrees with this. I don't know. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on this. I think a lot of people think this would be kind of cool. And once again, now that allocated loot exists in the game, that's not even, like, I was trying to think of a way that someone wouldn't just, like, slurp up all the Uber item shards that I'm proposing. you know, like one player in your dungeon party slurps up all 8 of them and then just creates 2.5 items by themselves. But the allocated loot prevents that, though, you know. And if it's a 1 in 20 chance and you do it with 2 or more people in the dungeon, that's really cool. I think that'd be really cool. It encourage party play. It would encourage killing those really tough fights beyond just tier 0, farming for the main reward. And yeah, I think that's definitely would just round out a lot of that end game content. Um, Runewords. All right, so this is still a difficult conversation, and I went hard on this. I remember in the last video, and I'm gonna continue going hard on this. This is no joke. I really believe in this. I really think that the LOD D2R Enigma teleport would elevate this game. I think it belongs in PD2, and I think the jank ass teleport that Enigma currently has is still feels like a jank, I don't know, resurgence leftover, you know, from another mod or some kind of other mod like Path of Diablo that's now defunct, where this game, of course, you know, got some of its original inspiration. But you get the idea. It's kind of like a holdover, but I actually think that the original Enigma fits better into this mod for many reasons. I've got like a manifesto here, multi-point manifesto. Yeah, without the sorceress damage penalty. You see, I still think the sorceress should have a damage penalty because they get it for free. But a John, a Burr, let's talk about this, all right? I'm recommending it to revert to like even a nerfed version of the Enigma that has even lower stats than it currently has. So the current Enigma isn't as strong stat-wise as an LOD Enigma. But I'm actually like recommending it reverse closer to the really weak stats it had like pre-season 1, like the original Enigma proposed for the Project Diablo 2, except for Enigma's teleport, which I think should be fully restored. No charges, no blinks, no just infinite teleport all the time. Obviously, mana withstanding, so it costs mana. Um, I think that's fine, 100%. And I think if you nerf the stats enough on the rest of the item, you know, gave it 1 skill and just have like a lower amount of strength and MF, no life per kill. I don't know about the 1 skill. Maybe even 2 skills is still fine. And, you know, I'll talk about why when I talk about some of these reasons here. But yeah, I mean, I think if you do that, you create a clear and pronounced trade-off between the damage and survivability potential of so many other options and mobility supremacy. So you either get mobility supremacy, or you go for the huge amount of damage potential that a +2 skill 3-socketed Arcane's Valor can provide, or a 3-skill 2-socketed Arcane's Valor. Remember, you can't even corrupt Runewords. So Runewords got hit really hard, particularly when the mod came out, because they nerfed the crap out of them, and then all these corruptions just like completely blew them out of the water. So much so that the only runewords that were still effective were ones with sirs or burrs in them, and all the other runes were pretty much valueless because, you know, Breath of the Dying, you had a Zod in it, but Breath of the Dying got destroyed by any basic corrupted, you know, giant hammer, right? So, or giant spear with 6 sockets in it. So this is where, like, in this Runewords section, where I'm still seeking some restorative justice to this scenario. And don't get me wrong, I feel like they've restored so many Runewords, and they've also improved a lot of their own Runewords that they've made over the course of seasons, and they made tons of Runewords way more viable overall. So much so that almost all the runes have solid value now, and that's not really a problem anymore. But doesn't mean there's still not a lot of room for improvement. And that particularly comes to some Runewords that just still feel pretty jank to use, and there's maybe only a couple scenarios you would use them, particularly for Runewords as iconic as Enigma. So, here's really what I'm looking at here. I'm looking for at the fact that like Sorceress still has their teleport basically, except for damage loss immediately after teleporting. And when it comes to farming LOD content, nothing can keep up with it. And because there's such huge gaps between killing monsters and Lord of Destruction, you really need high mobility to keep up. So in the late game, let's say you want to farm corrupted zones for shards, the vast majority of players, if you're ever farming a corrupted zone, are using a sorceress. Now, that's not necessarily the case when you start out, like when the mod just had a ladder reset. A lot of the time, you'll have people playing the other classes because it's not all about mobility. It's just about like killing an area over and over, and some of those areas don't require a lot of mobility. But when it comes to corrupted zones, the vast majority do. And if you don't have it, you're just losing out on potential shards. And I don't think, once again, I think the Sorceress is in a good place now. She doesn't feel like junk anymore, for the most part, except for the fact maybe she's lacking a little bit of certain kinds of survivability, see above. But when it comes down to that, though, I think for the most part, yeah, it would be nice to have LOD Enigma again so that if you wanted that option, you really want that option, you can do it. You can do it. You could have something that could keep up with a sorceress and you could still farm the shards. You could have it in your stash even and just slap it on instead of your damage armor when you need some shards and you don't feel like, oh, I have to create a sorceress. Otherwise, I can't get shards. And the problem is a lot of people don't want to trade the Worldstone shards either. Often in late season because they're using them so often. So like being able to farm them yourself is a pretty big deal. So I really think a fully restored Enigma teleport would even the playing field in the mid and late game. I don't mean like fully restored in all the stats. I even think the stats could be nerfed further because really what you want is that option for that mobility. And then if you want damage and a lot more damage, like way more damage, there's all these other options. Or if you want way more survivability, you got Shaftstop, you got Leviathan. There's all these other crazy items when you get the crazy corruptions that are going to way outperform Enigma when it comes to bossing and mapping. But Enigma has a unique role into where you could play builds in a unique way, perhaps, like for mapping or for bossing. But it's not something that's super dominant. And for corrupted zones or LOD farming, you finally have a way to reach that parity with the sorceress when you have a Jaw and a Burrune. I don't think that's too much to ask for. I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's good with how the game is currently set up with corrupted zones. I think it works with the current state of the game. I think a restored Enigma is a good thing. Even magic maps, fort maps, yeah, there's just other options for dealing with the bigger or larger gaps in between monster packs. There's just another good option here. It's just a fun thing too. Like it's actually fun to like teleport like that in a lot of classes. In some cases, it was a fun experience in D2R and LOD to be able to do that. It really was. Weaving skills in between teleports. It's just it's a fun thing that I think it doesn't make it required because you have maps, right? Maps, constant monster density, no gaps between monsters when the density is high enough, right? For something like that, Enigma's probably not all that useful. Enigma ain't gonna really do all that much in terms of damage or survivability when you're always on the clock and you're taking huge amounts of damage against those Pinnacle bosses. So Enigma, even an Enigma with decent stats, is already kind of in a wonky place. And where it is currently, you'd only use it on like a handful of builds, like ever. Physical casters, magic damage, Ellie traps. And I feel like if they bring it back, when it comes to mapping, you're really only going to see it on those builds for mapping anyway. You never see it for bossing. So, yeah, I don't think this would be that bad. You might see it in a couple more scenarios, like ones where maybe you keep it in the stash, but that's a good thing, though. That's a good thing. It means you don't have to make a sorceress for farming those Worldstone shards. I think that's good. You don't feel like it's just so much better, and there's just not a lot more you can do about it. particularly if you're a Xana or a Barbarian or something. You know, you're not a Necromancer or a Druid that have those other teleports. See, that's the thing, is also PD2 has all these other mobility options that make Enigma already not super dominant. And that's my point, is when you have all this extra monster density in the endgame, you have these ultra powerful bosses, and you have those already built in huge options for mobility built into mercenaries and the kits of the characters themselves by having new skills. Enigma already isn't going to be as crazy as it was in LOD. There's no potential for it to be. So this isn't a bad thing. And I don't think it would hurt to increase the value of Jarun, particularly in the early game, where it would make the most impact when you're farming the LOD areas. Um, because Jarun does become pretty decently valued in the late game, late season, but early season it still has a pretty weak value, particularly compared to Burr. You know, we're still talking about like under half the value or half. That's kind of pathetic. So for a rune that's the same rarity or virtually the same rarity, right? It's very close. I think Burr's slightly rarer, but like it's so slight, it's not even funny. It's like it's like a 1% difference. So yeah, I mean it's just saying, just saying. It's like I said, would still not be best in slot endgame content for most builds, even with this scenario, and with all the other mobility solutions that are dominant in PD2. Um, yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it. But it is cool though. It's cool and make a lot of things a lot less janky. You don't feel like you have to like weave two mobility skills together. Like there's a lot of weird things you got to do currently with the current Enigma that are, I don't know, it just feels weird. Um, and and this is kind of another point, is that it's not like there aren't other runewords in the game like Innocence and Infinity that aren't already pretty dang dominant on a lot of build approaches. So it's not like having Enigma only being able to use it on a couple builds, it's already far behind a lot of these other runewords in terms of how often it's used. I think I would give it the chance. I would give it a chance. I would definitely restore it ASAP next season if possible. Let's go. Let's do it. Um, I don't know. I feel like I make a lot of really solid arguments here, but if you disagree with me, let me know. Fully restore or nearly fully restore Grief's total damage potential without it being flat. Um, yeah, so in other words, you don't have to give it back its flat damage that make it like overpowered for smite, but I do think that where it's at currently, it just doesn't have the damage. Maybe not fully restore it, but I'd get it even closer. I'd buff it again. If you buffed it one more time, I think people might start using it again. Right now, low is basically fortitude, you know, at least in the early game. This is an idea I have. You know, there are no Sorceress or Runewords. I think it'd be really cool to make one of these, and it doesn't even have to be a low or a jaw anymore because of the new ones they've made. But you know, it could be something like that, granting like a mini conviction aura that's cheaper than Infinity, doesn't require two burrs, but it's like a mini Infinity that you could use on yourself, and it also open up other options to put on the mercenary, so that it doesn't feel like every sorceress build is you know, a Defiance mercenary with an Infinity. This could also open up other possibilities, so that the mercenary could be different, and then your weapon could be the same, and then you could have other everything else built around it as well. This kind of like works with my theme as well of you know, making the giving like maximum life or life as a base stat to orbs. I definitely think sorcerer's orbs could definitely use to play a larger role in like filling some of these gaps in the game. I think that could be really cool. Return death ED percent back to normal values. Not worth creating at the moment. Over nerf from Deadly Strike nerfs already. Yeah, the Deadly Strike nerfs are what hit Deadly Strike the hardest. So much so that I feel like you either need to return death back to the normal LODED values, or you need to give it like maximum Deadly Strike, like we gave Head Striker and Ray Skin and things like that. Something like that is definitely needed. Otherwise, people just are not going to meet it. It's a Vex and a goal. It's not super cheap. It even requires a difficult base to find, too. Um, Yeah, I think this was made maybe too often, like in season one, which is why this happened. But I don't think we're at much of a risk of this anymore with a lot of the other changes. So I definitely would like to see this rune word become at least somewhat impactful again. That'd be cool. Um, Breath of the Dying, when it comes to, so the thing is like with obsession and innocence and all the crazy corruptions you could Zod and the full repair from Zod and all this other crazy stuff. And I mean, like, I don't know. Zod just has so many great uses now in PD2 that Breath of the Dying is just like, it feels so bad to make a Breath of the Dying that even now that they've restored Breath of the Dying to LOD values, I don't think it's enough because most of the time you're gonna want to make it in a two-handed, and one hand just doesn't feel good enough. I would actually buff it further than LOD. It kind of needs to be, considering that it requires a Vex and a Zod at this point in order to really compete and be used for the rune. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think making a solid weapon with the Breath of the Dying would actually make people potentially do it. But even then, the crazy part is I think even if you buff this by 100%, there's a possibility people still wouldn't make it just because of how many much more valuable uses of Zod that there are. You know, I only gave a couple examples. There's more too. And then on top of that, you know, the crafts and the unique potential with really good corruptions are just so good that I think Breath of the Dying would still most often get overshadowed. But this would at least make it more competitive, and you might see it a bit more often. Increase odds of destruction procs, because otherwise the way it is, you may as well delete it from the game. Being totally honest. Increase odds of destruction procs slightly. Um, yeah, I think destruction's in a cool place, but you know, if you increase the odds even more, you could make it even more flashy, and there'd be more people using them for fun, and possibly even as a useful item addition to their arsenal. Increase obsession maximum life percent from 15 to 25 to 20 to 30%. So, um, this is just one of those things where I already said obsession is too dominant, right? But it's also not strong enough. So so I think there should be more options for the life, right? On the necromancers and the sorceresses, which are the characters that would use obsession, right? Um but I think obsession could even be used to be made stronger too, because it's not strong enough. So you buff this, and then you buff everything else even more, like strength dex conversion, the orbs, the wands, you know, everything else I talked about that they're having issues with the Pinnacle bosses because of. You know, make some runewords that do that so they can compete with something like obsession. Blah 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 blah. I think you guys get the idea, but I think we definitely need some more help in that regard. So I suggested something to the item. Every other rune word, I think, for its level and for the runes it requires, I think is in a pretty good place. It's just that a lot of these rune words are just still, you know, there's some rune words that are totally dead, and then there's things like Enigma that are still super janky, and there's actually really good potential to give LOD its Enigma its teleport back. It could be super hype. I think a lot of returning players would really love that. It would also make a lot of other players, I think, feel a lot less alienated by the feeling that the mod's super different from the original game, right? I think that's definitely one of those pain points, and I got way more arguments I can give, but I've given so many good ones, and I really see no downside. I hope this happens. I really do. I'm pushing for it. All other items restore +1 skill to Dark Sight Helm or add another useful stat. Yeah, just a very underutilized item. Schaefer's Hammer is just too fucking strong. It just is. I think we need to reduce the ED or static field chance. Probably the static field chance, because that's really what makes every other option, particularly things like Death Cleaver, things that you would think should be competitive with this, just not very competitive. Increase Death Web to -15 to 25 poison res. Yeah, a small buff to the negative poison res. it's so anemic compared to where it was that it doesn't feel like it really has the impact that you want it to for the Poison Nova and the other builds. It would also help them in those Pinnacle bossing scenarios, Desecrate Necromancers. Um, Definitely could really give them that extra boost so that Necromancers feel like they could actually be viable. It's not just a health thing, sometimes a damage thing. The one skill they have that's actually really solid against those Pinnacle bosses at higher difficulties, um, would really be the Death Web, the Desecrate and whatnot. That would be nice. I think there's a lot of reasons that should be done. So I don't even know if I don't even think they have to remove a plus skill to compensate, but they could if they feel like the negative res is starting to get out of control. I even think they could go 20 to 30 on this. The truth is like Poison Nova Necromancer for mapping is really only truly out of control when you have like really insane corruptions on like all of your items. Otherwise, it's nothing too insane. I mean, it's good, but nothing too insane, nothing too special is what I should say, relative to other abilities. I mean, Druid can get that level of power with like a tenth of the investment. So I mean, I don't really think it's that big of an issue. Um, Add curse resistance to Homunculus, allow it to roll 2 to 3 skills. Yeah, Homunculus, it's a rare enough item to where you would feel like it should be more useful and it should have more competitiveness with the rune words that you're able to make, all the other fun stuff. And because it's not really the case, I definitely think Homunculus needs to at least have the potential to have the same number of skills as Bone Flame, even though Bone Flame is rare. I get it, but it should have that potential at the very least. What differentiates it from Bone Flame, though, is that it's easier to hit max block, it's got res, so it's better defensively. So I would double down on the defensive theme, and I'd add curse resistance. But Bone Flame also has percent damage reduction, and it even has sustain from life per kill, which helps out Blood Warp. So, like, Bone Flame should still win out against Homunculus in most scenarios, but I think with a good corruption, people should definitely consider using Homunculus more often. I feel like Homunculus is just way too weak to compete with its competitors. Ume's Lament. So Ume's Lament has never been modified since LOD. I don't feel like there's any reason to ever use this. It's like you make a white wand and it beats this automatically. So I don't know. I mean, it's pretty bad. I would say allow it to roll up to 3 skills, and then at least there's a reason to potentially use it over White Wand, particularly before you get a good base or something, Give it something. Slightly decrease odds of casting slow movement on Chromatic Ire. Yeah, not like it was when they first made slow movement a thing on Chromatic Ire, but maybe make it a little bit more so like it's used a bit more often. That'd be cool. Relative to other staves. Make Hotspur roll. Yeah, so I think the nerfs to the Fire Res on Hotspur are fine, but because they hit so hard and because Water Walks already has 5% max Fire Res, I feel like Hotspur should have something that at least kind of competes with it a little bit. I mean, yeah, I could roll higher max Fire Res than Water Walks by 1, but that's about it. I think we should probably make it a little bit better. Maybe give it some fast run walk. Maybe give it some life. Something, something that makes it worth using. Make it a little bit better. I mean, you could even increase the max fire res from like 4 to 6 to 5 to 7 or 6 to 8, and I think that's still fine personally. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I mean, you already have like 8% poison res on an Andariel's Visage, and Hotspur is pretty rare in Hell, so over nerfed? I would say so. I would bring it back a little bit. Buff Achilles Strike's flat damage range. Yeah, Achilles Strike, they introduced it. Could be a decent mid-game weapon, but there's not a lot of reasons to use it. Not really. I would buff the damage it can do, maybe even add enhanced damage to it. Increase Rib Cracker. Yeah, Rib Cracker, I would say in Season 1 and 2 was pretty good, but ever since they allowed for all these big attack speed corruptions and all these other items, and the fact that you can only roll 4 sockets on it maximum, And that's if you upgrade it, I think. Or actually, it might still be limited to 3 sockets. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I would definitely make it to where you can at least hit higher breakpoints with shape shifting on this thing. I really think it needs a buff. Otherwise, people are just never going to use it ever again. Definitely a situation where we're virtually on the verge of just saying like Ribcracker could be deleted from the game. So probably should buff that. Uh, Scorn, I like the theme of Scorn, like a melee sorceress orb. You're slapping someone with your orb. I definitely think they should like hone in a bit more on this theme though. Really give people incentive to use this over a different item. Scorn doesn't necessarily have the best frames, it doesn't give you attack rating, so it's pretty hard to use still. Maybe give it some attack rating, maybe give it even more IS, something like that. I think that'd be cool. Wraith Skin, I think it's almost there. You could either remove the maximum life penalty, but since that makes it unique, I would say, okay, whatever. Maybe increase the enhanced damage even more, though, and then I think we're there with the rest of the stats. I think we're there to the point to where it resembles a bit more of like a safety armor if you get like a really good corruption on it. And then it's like not quite a safety armor though, right? Because it's not DR, it's just amp protection. So there is a drawback to that, and you could be killed without amp, right? Because you don't have a lot of DR with it. But I do think defensively it's a little too weak to justify the current power, so I would buff the power a bit more. Increase the proc chance of Pompey's Wrath. Yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool for that. Definitely higher chance to, I believe it's, what is that, Molten Boulder? No, it's Volcano, right? Yeah, it's Volcano. Should have a bit higher. It might make people use it a bit more. It's they did a pass where they like made all the items have better procs and better proc chances. I think this one kind of got left behind a bit. Give 2 throw 60 to 100% enhanced damage. Yeah, so open wounds is a thing, and so is Deadly Strike. But since Deadly Strike, since the big nerfs on it though, 2 throw isn't that big of a deal. Even if you get a really good corruption on one, it feels kind of whatever. I think to double down on the open wounds theme though, you would need actually some more damage on it to compete with more things. I would give it some damage, kind of like I'd give like Wraith Skin a bit damage, like some actual enhanced damage. I think that'd make it used more often again. Make Storm Chaser procs on attack. Yeah, I think they'd be a lot cooler to do on attack than on strike, than being struck, and then you would actually see it get used more often. One way to make Lance Guard get used more often with its Deadly Strike is to also give it enhanced damage. Trying to make some of these items actually get used. Like a lot of these items that we're going over here are just not getting used at all. Avert a Shoot as Temper. Yeah, I'm not sure why this was nerfed to begin with. I think the negative reses are not that insane, particularly when you consider how powerful Ming Songs and Skull Collector is for like a sorceress. I think a Shooters should actually be a lot more competitive damage wise. And not only that, but I think Sorceress Orb should even have like a base stat. I think I think this I would definitely buff a Shooters. I don't think it's in a great place this season. I would use a staff every time over this. Even Death's Fathom is just so much better than a Shooters for cold. The fire and the light ones, I mean, unless you're going like double Dragon Hydra Sork, I mean, that's one reason to use a Shooters, I guess. That's about it, though. The Armageddon's Blade that's particular to Paladins, I think it needs a little bit more power for it to be used in a more dominant way. A way where you would justify using it over other things in certain builds. And since it's really rare and hard to acquire, I think you could boost the negative enemy fire resistance by 5 or 10. Absolutely. Either that or you can open it up to every class and see what happens. Go with the Anarchy approach. Adjusting Wisp Projector, Heart of the Wolverine to level 3 and Nature's Peace to level 3. Yeah, so they nerfed them to level 2 this last season. They feel really weak, like very almost like barely making any impact at level 2. It's kind of sad. And at level 5, I would say they're a little too strong and dominant. So I think a good happy medium would be level 3. I think they can get rebuffed to level 3, and I think that would be the sweet spot to where they're making enough of an impact to feel like, you wouldn't just want to use BK Set Ring a lot of the time over Wisp Projector, especially with those buffs, right? And then, Nature's Peace still has its very unique, like, powerful survivability role. I think you can accentuate those without it being too overpowered. Nerf Whispering Mirage down to -3 to -5 enemy physical resistance. Yeah, it's a little too strong. I mean, when you have an item that was kind of built for like Mind Blast being used even for Blade Sin just because of this stat being too high, you should probably nerf it. Add plus 50 life to Blade Buckle. Yeah, double down on its identity as a faster hit recovery belt where you might want to take damage from thorns. That'd be kind of cool. Might get used a bit more often like that. That item doesn't get used much as it is. If not hardly at all, particularly with the options for crafting. Remove Joust cooldown. Okay, so this is where I'm surprised they haven't done this yet, because I know for a fact that Senpai and a lot of the other devs do not like certain items being this dominant. So this season they changed the martial skills into shadow skills on Stalker's Cull, and its Stalker's Cull is still the most dominant weapon for every elemental martial build, even without the plus skills. Shocker, but not too shocking, considering that the real problem, the real culprit here, has nothing to do with the damage output, which is already really high on those abilities, which it kind of needs to be. But the real culprit is the fact that there's only 2 items in the game that offer this stat. And for Paladins, there's only one way to get it. Alma Negra for Joust, and for Assassins, there's only one way to get it, which is Stalker's Cull. That has made these items hyper dominant for mapping. So much so that using a Herald of Zakarum for any build that maps kind of seems dumb, as long as you have sufficient damage, which most of the time you do. You're always going to use Alma Negra on the most efficient Vengeance mapper. You're always going to use Alma Negra on the most efficient Sacrifice Paladin. Everything. It's the same thing for elemental martial builds. You're always going to use Stalker's Cull, even Dragon Tail. I mean, you're using Stalker's Cull. I mean, it's pretty rough, man. It's pretty rough stuff. It really is. It's hard to and losing the skills on Dragon Tail actually kind of hurt Dragon Tail relative to the other skills, so that wasn't really great. What I would say is I'd add those back in, but completely eliminate these 2 stats on these items, instead replacing them with other stats. I know I give some suggestions here. I feel like this stat is just way too good. Instead, what I would do is just reduce the base, like the level 1. So like I think Joust starts at like 3.5 or 3 seconds. Reduce it by 0.5. Just reduce the level 1 cooldown by 0.5. Do the same thing for Dragonflight, and yeah, I think that's the right move there. I think that would also give them a slightly more starting mobility as well, to compete a bit better with the likes of Druid and Necromancer and Sorceress in the beginning, like for the start of the season. I don't think that'd be a bad thing. I don't think it'd be bad at all. I mean, and then of course you have Barb and Amazon relying a lot on faster run walk from Frenzy and Vigor and whatnot. That's fine. But I think for these 2 classes, they could use that in the beginning, 1. And 2, if they have that built in, then they don't need it on an item. And they'll still be the same. Every ability will still perform just as well. But Alma Negra and Stalker's Cull will have identities that are different. And they don't require a stat that literally is basically a required stat for any efficient mapper currently. Stats like this, I'm going to say, yeah, just remove them and build it into the skills themselves. For sure. If I don't give them this idea, I'd be surprised if they hadn't already thought of it at this point. The fact that they removed the martial skills and replaced them with shadow skills is an indicator last season that they are definitely trying to reduce the dominance of Stalker's Call. Unfortunately, I don't think they have yet achieved that, and I think this is the only way you really can achieve that. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. Nerf Sigurd's Staunch to 2-3 to Iron Skin. Yeah, a little too strong. It's a little too powerful. You can just get absurd amounts of defense on any character. And honestly, even 2-3 is going to be really strong. But I think nerfing it a little bit for both self and mercenary use, particularly in combination with items like Steel Carapace, yeah, it's a little crazy. Really high defense armors and things like that. Uh, Probably should tone it down a bit. I mean, you could tone down the max life too. I think it's a little too strong, but it wasn't like too strong. Some people think it's like way too strong. It's not that. Like, it doesn't have DR or anything, so there's definitely some weaknesses to it. But like the amount of defense it gives is actually kind of nutty, for sure. Overused, absolutely overly dominant in some situations like mercenary survivability, self survivability. If you have any other high defense items, it's a little crazy. Increased Stormlash static field chance. Yeah, I think Stormlash should get used a bit more often for how rare it is. If you get a good corruption on it, you should definitely see more Stormlash and not just Schaefer's Hammer every time. I think Schaefer's Hammer should have like a pretty small static field chance, and Stormlash should have a high one because Schaefer's has much more damage than Stormlash. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Add 10% faster cast rate to Viscera Twant. Yeah, no one's ever going to use that item, I think, unless it gives faster cast rate for a sorceress. Probably not. Just give it at least a little bit, right? It'll be something cool to use for the early game. And then it might actually beat out, some other silly options. Add removes Blood Wart percent current life penalty to Sacred Totem. So I actually have an interesting idea for this. So Sacred Totem, I think, is not a bad concept. The fact that they kind of doubles down on your revive capability and your curses and whatnot. But in order to make it actually, like, I think, strong enough and useful enough in enough scenarios, especially to use over something like Bone Flame or even Dark Force Spawn, when you have that for curses as well, to make it actually get used for how rare it is and whatnot, why not give it a very unique stat? A stat that removes the Blood Wart percent of current life penalty when you use it. In other words, basically makes it like Enigma Teleport or normal or Sorceress Teleport, except with no damage penalty either. I think that could be really cool, actually. And really feeds into the identity of it being the Sacred Totem. It's a special item. It's sacred. You don't. You could just sacrifice with that. No need to sacrifice your own blood. I think that's a cool idea. I think that would actually make that item a lot more worthwhile, and you'll actually see use with it. I think that could be a really unique benefit to it that no other item has. Yeah, it doesn't give you the sustain or the survivability of some of the other Necro Shields. It doesn't give you as many plus skills. Like, I forgot to mention Martyrdom. Yeah, Martyrdom just kills this thing. Yeah, you really need a bit more of a unique identity, so I would do that. Add an additional set ring to make picking up set rings more worthwhile. Yeah, I still want this. I mean, I don't know if they will, but I think just having another set ring of some kind would be really cool here. I don't know what set they would add it to, but something to where you're looking for 2 rings, not 1. Because for amulets, there's a whole bunch you might want to look for. I mean, I know for the most part people just look for towels, but there's other ones too, though. I mean, there's Arathas, some other ones that can get good corruptions, early game declone and whatnot. But for rings, I mean, it's like, yeah, you're basically looking for 1 ring. I don't know. It would be neat. I still think that's something to push kind of on the low key there. Slightly nerf full Alders set bonuses. Yeah, I do think they did this, by the way, for Mavina's set in the last 2 seasons, which I appreciate. I think they should do this a little bit for Alders as well. It's a little too strong early game, a little too overwhelmingly powerful. Reduce base damage reduction percent, rolls on rare armors. Yeah, so I think the safety armor crafts, as much as I enjoy them, I have to I have to admit that they're so dominant that you'd almost not want anything else on it, like late game melee. So yeah, I would make that a little weaker. I'd make it a little weaker. And one thing to add for the items, by the way, is with the Paladin change that I proposed with making these like elemental damage auras have more uniqueness, you could make the soft points and defensive skills, not hard points, but soft points, scale them to where maybe you don't only want offensive GCs for damage, but it would actually be make it worth it to have an alternative approach that could actually compete with the main damage approach, which is accentuating the special effects of the skill itself and scaling it up. I think that'd be really neat, and then you could make defensive GCs viable. Super cool idea. You could like combo with the Paladin idea. You know, do that for a season. That season would be pretty sick, right? You know, we wouldn't even have to like, you know, put an insane amount into it. Stats. Okay, so honestly, most things they addressed, or I don't really think need to be addressed anymore. Like I thought, like maybe for a while there that like curse duration reduction was kind of worthless, but I think there's a decent. I think if they just keep increasing the prevalence of curse resistance, I think curse duration reduction is still a decent stat. I think that's fine. You can leave it in the game. It's not going to matter much. I still think they could improve certain crafts though with other types of stats that currently can't be crafted. And also increasing the prevalence of curse resistance would be kind of cool. Maybe even a little bit of negative physical res, so you're not always using the same items for that stat. I don't think there's anything wrong with having that stat in the game, but yeah, I think that's actually really cool. They could actually have some more crafts, and they could make new crafts. They could modify some crafts to do this. Maybe they can make some of these stats spawn in small amounts on rare items. I don't know. They could definitely consider it, though. I definitely would push for that. I think that could increase the viability of rares and crafts and blues a bit more. This is still something I think that could be cool. So instead of like increasing your gold find, even though gold find would still do the most for you, increasing your light radius would also not just increase your visibility, but would also increase your auto gold pickup range. Or I think that'd be neat. I think that'd be kind of cool. Just like give light radius a bit of a nudge into something that helps it out a little bit. And since like gold is invisible in a lot of filters anyway, you would just get slightly more gold just passively from that. Be kind of neat. Shrines. Shrine buff timer. Yes. Yes, that would be cool. Add that to the buff timers. New shrine that drops 3 worldstone shards. Rare shrine like gem shrine. Yeah, that'd be cool. And remove one of these currently worthless shrines, like the poison and exploding one that still do absolutely nothing. They still exist in the maps and whatnot. Yeah, so you could just remove some useless or annoying shrines and then replace them with worldstone shard shrine. Make the elemental resistance shrines also grant buffs to that type of damage as well. Kind of make them like a combat shrine, but not for physical damage. That'd be kind of neat. Create a new shrine that clears any curse or status. So it could be like a well. So you could just put more wells in the maps. That'd be kind of neat. You could do that as well. And then gem shrine should upgrade 1 to 3 gems instead of 1. So maybe they upgrade a couple of your gems instead of 1. So maybe sometimes they only upgrade 1, but they could also upgrade up to 3. Make it more worthwhile to actually click that shrine. Definitely, they haven't. These have been suggested since the last iteration of my improvement suggestions. So not a lot of work done here, but to be fair, this isn't like these aren't huge things. They're just kind of cool things. I think that'd be neat to have, and they still improve on a lot of the shrine changes that they've already done. Quality of life, man, with that currency tap this last season, they really hit a lot of the right notes. I mean, they fixed the whole rejuvenation potion problem. They fixed a lot of things. So I removed a lot of things off of here. Pretty big stuff. That being said, different color backgrounds on the charms that are not ID'd versus ones that are simply not in the charm inventory. This is still frustrating to me. They appear red, right? So there's a red background behind a charm if it's not ID'd, right? And then you have a charm inventory down below where there's only charms. But the thing is if it's not in the charm inventory, it also has the red background. I really wish they would differentiate that with a different colored background. That way, when I'm trying to ID my charms, I'm not like, fumbling on a charm that's already ID'd because it's not in the charm inventory. I'd still like them to do this at some point. Make it possible. I've said this like multiple videos now. This one's still here. What can I say? That'd be cool to see them address that at some point. Make it possible when you pick up items for them to automatically be put in the Haraja cube. Yeah, so this is kind of a cool idea. I think like it's like a quality of life. I mean, they've created so many like loot filter things and so many auto pickup things, including with gold. One thing that could be cool is like if you pick up an item and you have space in your cube, it puts it in there. That way you don't ever have to play Tetris or pick it up manually, put it in the cube when you just want to, map and you just want to keep clearing monsters and finding items. Playing cube Tetris is definitely sometimes annoying. So this is one area where they could still do something kind of neat there if they wanted to. Consider making an in-game setting option to have characters in the character select screen appear in order of creation instead of experience amount. Yeah, or just a way to change them, like drag and drop the order of your characters on your account. That would be cool. The fact that they're currently in order of just the amount of experience they have, the character level, means that even the non-ladder and the ladder characters can get jumbled up. I mean, you could make that a way to order them as well, so you could separate them. But I think just being able to drag and drop them would be kind of cool. I don't know if they could do that, but that'd be pretty sick. They could make for a lot easier organization of your accounts into mules and main characters, non-ladder, ladder, that kind of stuff. Allowing re-rolling of jewel, ring, amulet, GC color graphic with some kind of key recipe. Yeah, I still think this would be cool. I mean, I think some people might be against this because they like the uniqueness of the graphics and they like trying to trade for like, 4 blue jewels only, but it's also kind of annoying to some extent. You have people only in trade mode only wanting like blue 5/5 lightning facets. And if you don't have it, you can't trade it to them. And I don't know. I think that's kind of dumb. I think there should still be a way to like change or cycle through graphics, even if it's not super easy to achieve. I think it'd be cool to have at least the option to attempt it. Absolutely. Add auto pickup for gems, runes, mats, potions as an option for solo gameplay only. So this would be cool in either single player or a theoretical self-found mode that doesn't currently exist. But I think it'd be really cool. And then light radius could be used for this in addition to gold. I think this would be really cool that you could have an option in the settings to do this. But obviously this would be problematic for party play. I mean, it makes sense why it would be, right? So yeah, I think because then you would just like hoover everything, right? But it'd be cool to have an option you could just put that in just to like hoover, you could even separate the types of items that could be hoovered out in the settings, and you could just check the boxes if you want to hoover them up, at least the ones that are shown by your loot filter, right? If your loot filter isn't showing them, then you won't hoover them up. Gold could be hoovered up even without being shown by the loot filter, but these, you could specify that the loot filter has to be, activated for that. That'd be really cool. I think there's a lot of items that could be really tedious to pick up in maps, and as gems and runes and mats just in general become even more impactful for crafting and for re-rolling jewels and charms, which has become so much better in season 11. Having an ability to make not picking up all the gems or runes or whatever not a hassle would be really cool for sure. Separate game sounds. Yeah, being able to separate those in the settings and just turn them off, I think that'd be huge. And you could just do this universally on any character. You don't have to like delete sound files or anything. That'd be neat. Things like Warcry Barb or, Hi-Yaw-Sin. You know what I'm talking about. Hi-Yaw Assassin. Hi-Yaw, hi-yaw, hi-yaw. Yeah. Well, anyway, if certain sounds are annoying, you can turn off the character sounds. Maybe you don't want to hear the loot drop. Maybe you don't want to hear the monsters make noises. Whatever it is, you could just turn it off. That'd be kind of cool. They've definitely they've introduced so much quality of life in terms of things like this. So these things are just kind of a continuation of things that they've already done, things that are still possible. Remove the sell buy buttons from vendors and confirm. Yeah. Um. Yeah, just removing some of those old buttons from the vendors that are no longer really needed anymore. Um, things that could just be annoying. Further reduce gold costs of repairing superior items. Um, yes, I do think superior items are still way too expensive under gold to repair, requiring Ral runes and whatnot. I think it's kind of crazy still. I think there should be an extra gold cost, but even though they've nerfed it, they should nerf it further. I agree with that. Mercenary aura skill level in the mercenary 8 advanced stat sheet. Yes, yes, please. Undead demon damage in that as well. Yes, in the normal character info or the mercenary sheet. Yes, there's still some info in the mercenary sheet overall that they could still add, and there's still some frames missing on certain skills. Definitely be cool to have all that filled out. PvP unique rule sets. Yeah, just I don't know. Could even have a battle royale mode where you start at level 1. You know, you pick up various things that can level you up along the way, or kill random monsters you see to give you like an extra level. Every monster you kill like levels you up once. You can pick up items, use items, upgrade them really fast, like a super fast play Diablo mode. Um, and then if you find another character, you can try to kill them, and then until there's only one person left and that person wins. That'd be really sick, actually. Seeing someone create something like that in D2 would be neat. You know, Battle Royale. There's a lot of games that work like that. Just kind of where you're like finding stuff, finding stashes, you know, finding weapons, finding like whatever it is that could make you stronger. You know, items of plus skills, items of other things. I'd be neat. I'd be neat. Just have like a really large map where people are just going around looting, stashing stuff, hiding from other players. You know, finding other players, just teleported to random places on the map when they spawn in. That'd be neat. Cool concepts, right? Site, trade site. So yeah, I have a bunch of things. Honestly, they've been improving the site every season, but I still think there's some quality of life that could be used here. They did actually make it possible to set your shared stash pages public. I do think it should be easier though to access that option though. And what I mean by that is access other players' shared stash pages. Like maybe there should be like a unique link for that. There's no way to really link your public shared stash page. Um, yeah, that's one thing I would say there. But besides that, the rest of these have still been there since the other I last made this suggestion list. So just things that would kind of improve quality of life of the site or the functionality of the site. That'd be kind of neat. A lot of these things are already on Discord too, though, so you could argue that maybe Discord does serve some of this functionality, but a lot of these other things are site specific. I do appreciate the public shared stash pages, but once again, some ability to link it, just like you can link your character's gear. They have that, and it works really well. I think there needs to be custom links for those public shared stash pages too. I don't have that listed here, but that's like an improvement upon an improvement that they've already made this season. So I definitely forward that as well to the devs, absolutely. Holy Bolt, healing, dying. Actually, you know what? Maybe, I don't know. Mm, I don't know. This one's not very important. I'm actually to put that there though. Create a unique link for public shared stash pages. Yeah, that'd be pretty big. All right, cool. Miscellaneous bugs. Here I just list a bunch of bugs. that appear or disappear as they address them. There's actually a lot of very weird ones right now with like broken maps and broken creations of various maps. There's Pinnacle Uber exploits, yeah, some kind of nasty stuff, and I'm assuming they will fix these things by next season, so I'm not too concerned. And then some things that are still kind of a problem, that have plagued the mod since the beginning, or that still plague the mod, like Whirlwind not dealing damage, things like that. I think they've improved these quite a bit, but I think there's still improvements they can make. I mean, Charge has been mostly fixed. I think Whirlwind could still use some fixes, though. And then we get to, at the very end here, all right, 2 hours and 30 minutes into this change, improvements, suggestions, change, recommended changes for PD2 Season 12 and beyond. My podcast here, my diatribe, my manifesto, which, believe it or not, is shorter than it used to be. A lot shorter. As we've removed more things than added over the seasons because of just how much work they do on the mod. Just making either the changes that I would have suggested before irrelevant, no longer necessary, or directly adding the change I've suggested in its exact, in the exact form I've suggested it. But see, in many cases that has been done over the course of all these seasons. Many cases. But the thing is we've gotten down now to what I would consider to be the thing I would be most hyped about personally. Now, not everyone would be hyped about this, but for me, this would be huge. I am a huge solo self-found enjoyer, and playing this last season, particularly with the improvements they made for getting like skill grand charms so much easier, I really enjoyed solo self-found so much, in fact, that man, if they could just bring Path of Exile, Solo Self-Found, League experience into PD2 when they've brought so many other Path of Exile things into PD2 that's improved the game. Heck, they even got a Divine Orb in the game now. The Demonic Cube, which, oh yeah, dang, I forgot about the Demonic Cube. Oh man, wow, where should I put that, honestly? I mean, I guess it's an item, huh? Yeah, I'm gonna put it... Make Demonic Cube able to be used post-corruption. Rarity definitely justifies that. Yeah, I think, I don't know how I forgot about this too. I totally forgot about it. Totally. So many cases, man. So many cases. Um, yeah, I really think, honestly, yeah, I don't know how I forgot that one. Well, I just mentioned it, but I'll go back to Solo Self-Found in a second, but somehow I was just reminded because I was thinking of Divine Orbs, right? So I don't know how I forgot about the Demonic Cube. Yeah, the Demonic Cube, they made a new material that allows you to reroll the stats of a set or unique item. But it's so rare. It's a Zod rune rarity, and you can only use it before a corruption. You don't even know if the item is really going to be good. Like, sets and uniques are garbage until they get a corruption. Um, so it honestly feels pretty cruddy. And I know that Divine Orbs work like that in PoE. I know that they, um, yeah, I know they work like that in PoE. And I know that you can only use them prior to the corruption. But I think PD2 is different. I think the stats aren't as like impactful. Like, whereas in PoE the corruption, at least PoE 2, the corruption is like not as impactful as the base stats on the item, which is why you could really say that's the case for that. But corruptions are so strong in PD2, you almost have to allow for this. And if it's as rare as a Zod, you just have to. But anyway, back to Solo Self-Found. Um, yeah, man. I definitely think Which, by the way, I should also mention something. So one thing I had on this list for a long time was making it possible to cube puzzle pieces into puzzle boxes. See, that's a good example of them creating another solution that's not the one I suggested, but made me remove it from the list. So they made a map called the Imperial Palace where you can now get a puzzle box from the boss, and it's not super difficult to acquire. Because there's more ways to get puzzle boxes now, I don't really feel like you need to do that with the puzzle pieces. And for heavy crafter, those and just crafters in general, and for people that pick up those rares and make those unique items, those puzzle pieces are really good, and you could go through a lot of them trying to make really good crafts. So overall, maybe, it's fine that puzzle pieces don't cube into boxes, but that's what I originally would have suggested without the existence of the Imperial Palace. But you see, they addressed it in a different way, so I removed it from the list. But anyway, back to the end of it. We're getting close to the end of the video here. Soul of Self-Found is crazy. A huge portion, but not, not like breaking proportion. We're talking like, a large percentage of the population, maybe like 10 to 20% of all the people that play PD2 enjoy Soul of Self-Found single player. But the thing is most people will just play single player because it's better. It's just a better experience if you're playing solo than online. What would really encourage more of that participation and bumping up those numbers and more people wanting to support the servers and whatnot really would get that Solo Self-Found League. People being able to compete against other people that are only playing without trade, without interacting and getting help from other players whatsoever. That whole new level of competition would be great for Diablo 2, because Diablo 2, just like PoE, is one of those games that is really fun to play in Solo Self-Found, and where there's really a lot more depth to the gameplay, and there's a lot more of the content you actually have to engage in. You can't just specialize in doing one type of content, trade for everything, and achieve every goal you can in the mod and get to those really good builds. No, you have to actually do everything. And I think showcasing that in some form, a competitive form, would be huge. Now, I've been told that this could be difficult to implement, but if they can do it, this would be like the most hype thing I have seen in probably any season. And given all the crazy hype things they've done over past seasons, that's saying a lot. Man, that'd be huge. And then I do emphasize, kind of like with the Enigma change I'm promoting, that this would not be a negative thing. There's most players this would affect are players that already don't enjoy trading, players that play single player anyway. There's not that much overlap between those people and those people that don't have as much time and would rather trade anyway. The Solo Self-Found players tend to be the most dedicated of the base. They also tend to be more of the stream watchers as well, though. And this is why it'd be really good to engage a stream community. Not to be selfish, but man, would it be crazy for the community enjoyment in the PD2 section. It would be crazy. I think it'd be great. I think it would engage more of the community. I think it would barely impact, the trade community. You might see some people switch over to Solo Self-Found that would have never played single player otherwise without the competition. I don't think so, though. I think a lot of people just enjoy it anyway, and you may as well put them on your servers, increase the sense of community despite the fact that they're not able to engage with other players. Increase that sense of it and then making them actually part of the ladder and the ladder experience. On that note, on the ladder, I still would like them to implement this at some point. It's kind of jank that the most recent level 99 is the one that appears on top and not the one that got it first. They fixed this in D2R though. So in D2R, if you get first place, if you're the first assassin to 99, you stay on top. No matter what, you're rank 1. If someone reaches it second, they go to rank 2. They don't overtake the person who's rank 1. So, yeah, I think that'd be really cool to have that distinction be permanent and clear, the order they're able to achieve them. It also makes who should have the auras obvious as well, increasing that prestige further. Besides what you can maybe do on the website, right, to, immortalize such people as well. Also saving the deleted and the dead hardcore characters and just graying them out keeping them on the ladder despite being deleted or dead. Um, yeah, that would also be really cool. That's also, I really like the D2R ladder. The D2R ladder cleaned up the LOD ladder. Unfortunately, the PD2 still has the LOD ladder, so that'd be kind of cool. Some kind of, so this is where I've suggested this for a few iterations of this now. It's my idea of an Uber boss. I don't know if they'll ever do it, but I think the concept is really cool. It might be difficult to code, but I don't know. I think it'd be kind of neat. Some kind of shadow boss in a dungeon or pinnacle boss, like Declone, like a shadow or character mirror. So basically, create an AI version that uses your exact gear, uses your exact skills on your right click, whichever one you switch to or that you're currently using, uses your exact aura on your left click, whatever it is, and basically does your skills, and it basically gives PvP penalties, the 1/6 damage penalty or whatever it is on I'll be honest, I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to like the PvP changes on PD2. They've done so much to like rebalance it, and they made it so much more balanced. I think PvP is so balanced now, and the skills are so much more balanced after so many seasons of iterating on it. And with all the tournaments and whatnot, it'd be really cool to have like an AI boss that basically PvPs you, and it's a mirror of your character. It's like a Dark Link fight in Ocarina of Time. And they're really tanky, of course. The only difference is they don't have your HP. They have huge amounts of HP. And they do the damage to you. And you got a pot like normal, of course. And if you have really high damage abilities, they could potentially kill you really fast. But at the same time, if you don't deal enough damage, maybe you won't get through the HP, through their HP fast enough. I think that'd be a really cool concept, honestly. And then I think the reward, I even suggest a reward now, which I hadn't before. Make a reward to imbue a Guide's fortune with a skill, like a trap skill or something. So make a Guide's with a trap skill. That way you don't have to choose between having more damage in a map and the MF and the gold find from the Guides. You can get both. That'd be pretty neat. Anyway, just an idea. Maybe for season 20 or something. But at any rate, it's there at the bottom. And you never know. You never know when any of these can or cannot be implemented, but they do tend to get around to a lot of my suggestions, here and there. Every season it feels like they're either addressing one of these bullet points in a different way than I suggest, or they're addressing it exactly as suggested. So, it's pretty crazy to see. Anyway, that's all I have, and I'm going to do this every 2 seasons now, so 2 seasons from now we'll revisit this and see what has... some of these bullet points will disappear, and we'll have new ones to go over as well. Definitely a lot of new ones here. If you compare this video to the last one, you'll see a lot has definitely changed. A lot of things have been removed, and other things have been added in their place as the game continues to morph and change into a better version of itself every season. Anyway, Project Diablo 2 community, softcore, hardcore, PvP, PvE, solo self-found, single player. Everyone that enjoys this, see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you guys had a great season 11, and I'll see you guys next time. Dark Humility, over and out. Let's get it. Let me know what you guys think about any of them in the comments below, and remember, if you support any of these changes, spam the forums, spam the Discord feedback suggestions. Don't spam it, of course, but get more people on board, get more people to suggest them. If the devs see one thing being suggested or supported by a lot of people, they might be more willing to think it's a change that's worthwhile to actually put dev resources into, and one that a lot of the player base will enjoy and not hate. There you have it. Let's smash it. Let's get it. See you guys next time.